Okay, I will call to order the Thursday, February 13th, 2025 meeting of the North Andover Select Board.
And I call to order the February 13th, 2025 meeting of the North Andover School Committee.
And I call to order, seeing a quorum, the, I know you just said it, February 13th meeting of the North Andover Finance Committee.
If everyone could please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. On behalf of Chair Koenig and Chair O'Connell, I want to welcome you all and thank you for joining us tonight. Tonight's meeting is a little bit unique in our community, so we thought it would be a good idea to give you a little sense of what to expect for tonight. We're getting there. We're getting there. Just Good? Everyone can hear me now? Great, okay. So like I said, we want to give everyone a sense of what to expect for tonight's meeting. We'll begin with a presentation from Town Manager Rodriguez and Superintendent Lathrop about the budget process. From there, we'll move into a discussion amongst our three boards facilitated by Mark DeSalvo. Collectively, we felt that a facilitated discussion would help ensure that everyone's voices are heard, all perspectives are heard, and that we're able to advance the discussion in a productive manner. Following that discussion, we'll allot 1 hour for questions from the public. Again, this will be moderated by Mark DeSalvo. We'll strive to answer whatever questions folks have that we can tonight. Any questions that we're unable to answer for whatever reason, we'll get to work after this meeting, finding those answers and getting them posted up on the website with the FAQ. We recognize that our budget process and our town's financial planning is extremely complex. Our goal for tonight is to make sure that everyone can walk out of here with a better understanding of the process, a better understanding of their options, and a better understanding of the challenges that we face so that we can head to town meeting as one community. We may differ as to how to reach that goal of making North Andover the best community that it can be, but at least we can all agree that that is the goal, and we can aim to reach it together. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. DeSalvo for a couple of comments.
Thank you very much, Brian. My role is to act as a facilitator at this tri-board meeting in order to spur meaningful conversation at the table among the boards, as well as afford the opportunity for thoughtful questions and equally responsive answers. I am not doing this in my role as town moderator under no circumstance. I'm simply a citizen who's been asked to assist in spurring discussion so that we can all come to some good common judgment. I've made known no public opinion about the matters in front of us. If I ask a provocative question or say something to elicit a response, please do not wrongfully determine or believe that that is some indication of the personal opinion that I might hold. Conversation among the boards today will take primacy, and then when that is concluded, there is no preset limit on that discussion at this moment in time. We will move to the audience, and residents will have the opportunity to ask questions. And again, my job is to endeavor that you ask a question, please, no statements designed as questions, and we'll make sure that you get answers if in fact those answers are available so that we can expand and this board and the community at large can afford a better understanding about what's in front of us. I do see that we're all sitting at, according to our board relationships right now, and in order to advance conversation, I'm going to ask that you as individual community leaders actually scramble at this moment in time and go sit next to somebody that is not a member of your board. So let the musical chairs begin.
Well, you can come over here and sit on edge of the world.
Would you rather be me?
Want me to sit in the middle of you? I think the idea is that we are. Yeah, let's do it. Actually, I think it's nice. Why not? All right, there you go. Then we won't have. There's not two thin comments. Eugene Irwin.
Your name tag is missing a name.
This is our newest member.
Thank you.
It's on mute right now. Hit the button.
Oh, Mr. Name Tag. We're very impressed.
Take it out of the whole.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you all for your cooperation. Can we hear me in the audience? Thank you very much. Lastly, I want to say that everybody, we all know each other pretty well, so this is going to be an informal discussion, and henceforth, we're going to refer to each other by first name and not title or Mr. or Ms. or any other circumstance like that. And I'd ask that the first time that you speak, that you state your full name and your association in terms of relationship. And other than that, first names only. As we heard from Brian a little bit earlier, the town manager and the superintendent of schools have a presentation. Melissa and Pam, you're on.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. I'm Melissa Rodriguez. I am the town manager. This is Pam Lathrop, our superintendent. And we are here today to walk you through a little bit of the budget process and how we've gotten to the point we are at today.
So as we already heard this evening, our goal here tonight is to leave this auditorium with a collective understanding of how we can move forward to town meeting with our fiscal year 26 budget.
A lot of these slides are purely for education for people who maybe aren't familiar with our budget process. This describes many of the boards and local officials that are up here. How's that better? Okay. This represents many of our boards and officials that are up here with us today. The only group that you won't see up here is the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee, which advises the town manager on estimates for revenues and fixed costs. This is a chart showing how our budget process works. We start around the October timeframe with the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee, which issues guidance to the town manager. That guidance is sent down to the schools and the town departments to create their budgets. They're both sent to me, typically around the first week in February. I compile those budgets and send them to the Finance Committee and Select Board. That's where we are now. The final vote is done at town meeting. This calendar shows where we are in our process. If you look, we're on February 10th to March 26th. That's when they're doing all of our final review. The FinCom holds a public hearing around March 26th, and around April 12th, we have to have our warrant completely finalized to be voted on May 13th at town meeting. This is a chart that shows our fiscal year 26 revenue. You've probably seen this before as we've gone through these different processes. The revenues for the fiscal year 26 budget total $133 million, a 4% increase from last year, and about $5.2 million increase. As many of you know, our four major revenue sources are property taxes, local receipts, intergovernmental, which is state aid, and transfers, which is money that we transfer from our enterprise funds for water and sewer. Our property taxes are expected to increase by 4% this year, local receipts by 10%, mostly due to our amazing work on our interest, which our town treasurer is in charge of, and our local aid, per our financial policies and procedures, is level funded from the year before. The reason we do that is that typically the governor's budget does not pass the House and Senate until well into our fiscal year. This year was actually August, and so we are safeguarding ourselves by doing that. This chart just shows a breakdown of the revenue sources. As you can see, obviously the tax levy makes up the majority of our budget. What's interesting is of that $102 million, about 84% of that is residential taxes. So a little background on what the levy is and how new growth works. So the levy is the amount of revenue we raise through real and personal property taxes. There's a law called Proposition 2.5 that dictates that we can only increase the tax levy by 2.5% a year plus new growth. That levy is actually calculated annually by the state. New growth is new tax levy we gain through development. Currently, we have no large projects on the horizon, so we expect new growth to continue to be level. As we warned last year, we anticipate tight budgets for the next 3 years. This is our historical new growth. You can see that in fiscal years 23, 24, and 25, we had new growth spikes due to Amazon. In 23 and 24, we were able to capture most of Amazon's new growth prior to them opening. We used it to fund the capital stabilization account because that was a one-time revenue source. We knew that Amazon's tax payment would decrease and were cognizant of not wanting to have taxpayers fund that exempted money. Difference between override and exclusion. An override and exclusion are the only ways to increase the tax levy outside of Proposition 2.5. An override is a permanent increase to the levy. It's for operating only. It requires a majority vote of town meeting and an election. And the only people who can call for an election is the select board. An exclusion can be used for debt or a single capital project. It's temporary until the project or debt is paid. It requires a 2/3 vote for debt at town meeting and a majority election. Levy capacity is when the town sets its levy below the levy limit. We currently and purposely have capacity due to Amazon based on policy decisions, approximately $5 million. A town cannot go back and get last year's levy capacity, but the levy does continue to increase based on the levy limit of the year before. So for example, if a town's fiscal year 25 levy limit is $100 and that town chooses to raise $90, fiscal year 26, your new levy limit is still $102.50. It still increases based on the levy limit from the prior year, not for how much you raised. But you still cannot go back to 25 and get that $10 that you didn't raise. This is an example of what happens when a property comes off the tax rolls. So in fiscal year 22, 400 Great Pond Road paid $14,762 in taxes. The town, through town meeting, purchased that property to protect the watershed and removed from the tax rolls due to the municipal exemption. The tax levy didn't go down. Instead, the burden for that $14,000 was spread to all of the other taxpayers. The same thing happens when the Amazon TIF goes into effect. What if we choose to budget to the levy limit? What if we decide we want to use the $5 million? There's two major impacts that could happen. There's an impact on average single-family homes. So for every $1 million raised, it's approximately $100. If we chose as a town to raise the entire $5 million, the average fiscal year bill would raise by 7.56%. So any of you at home could get your bill from this year, add 7.56% to it, and estimate what your bill would be next year. The other impact is on Facilities Master Plan 2. We had always planned to use the Amazon taxes as the TIF matures. Every 2 years, 10% of their exempted taxes come back to pay for the impact of Facilities Master Plan 2, about $1 million every 2 years. That plan includes Kittredge, the addition and renovation on Fire Station 2, an addition at the Youth Center, and renovations for both Atkinson and Franklin. The school projects would all require bigger debt exclusions, which is an override again for capital projects. I'm going to get more into that. This is an example of Amazon's property taxes. So you can see in fiscal year 24, because the occupancy permits had not yet been issued, we were able to raise new growth at $6.4 million. Fiscal year 25, once the occupancy permits went into effect, 80% of that was relieved, and 10% comes back every 2 years. Until finally, in 2035, the entire amount comes on. This is the impact of using that. So the blue would be paid for by Amazon, and the yellow would be paid for by residents and businesses. Approximately $50 decrease in this every 2 years for 10 years. This estimates the impact of town meeting spending on your fiscal year 26 tax bill. So you can see if your house is valued or a condo or business is valued at $100,000, it would increase by $28 for the operating budget and $57 for the levy capacity. The average single-family home is valued at $825,382. They would increase the regular 2.5%, $233, plus $470 for the levy capacity used. This is the impact of using the Amazon levy on Facilities Master Plan 2. As part of Facilities Master Plan 2, we committed to reserving debt as it falls off. So as a debt project is finished, instead of using that money to pay for something that's not capital, we've held it, paid for capital, and saved it so we can use it for the future debt for Facilities Master Plan 2. Currently, we have the value of about $16 million worth of projects, about $1 million. And in fiscal year 29, another $500,000 becomes available, which is about $8 million more of projects, for a total of $24 million. None of that changes. If we save the capacity to pay for Facilities Master Plan 2, we use that $24 million, we have approximately another $1 million coming on. We would need $27 million in debt exclusions, and the impact on the average single-family home is approximately $170 a year for 25 years. If we decide we want to use the Amazon tax levy to offset the budget, we have to use this new funding plan. 24 million construction capacity stays available. We now need 37 million in debt exclusions instead of 27 million, which changes the impact on the average single-family home to be about $267 a year for 25 years. So the total impact on the average taxpayer in the first year of taking the capacity and raising this project debt is about $737. So this chart shows the impact. The orange line is if we stuck with the current plan. And you can see that the bill would go from, in fiscal year 25, $9,300, to fiscal year 26, $9,539, 27, $10,044, and in 28, $10,295. And I should say this is an actual house on Salem Street that I've been following since I got here. And basically what I've done is it's a house that has no permits pulled on it. It has been in the average price range for all that time. And so it was a good thing for me to follow because I could see how that they were being impacted as residents. If we do decide that we want to go this route, what basically would happen is that the gray line would be followed instead. So in fiscal year 26, they would go from $9,300 to $10,004. In fiscal year 27, $10,521. And in fiscal year 28, $10,734. So based on the guidance that I received from the Facilities, the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee, as well as our tri-board, I forecasted revenues which allowed for our town departments to increase by 2.75% max, which is a reduced in level service, our fixed cost of 6.69%, and an education budget of 2.75, plus Medicaid and the middle school teacher reserve for a total of 4.4%. So I want to talk a little bit about free cash because we do receive a lot of questions about free cash. So this year we generated about 5.5% of our budget in free cash. We carried over 2.4 million and we generated 7.2 million. The goal usually is, and what they typically tell us to do, is to try to raise between 5% and 7%. Free cash includes annual receipts in excess of estimates and unspent amounts in budget lines, items for the year that just ended, and any free cash that we didn't spend the year before. Free cash is not a budget surplus, it's a combination of multiple years' operating results. I like to think of free cash as your credit card or your savings account, or even your tax return. If you use those funds instead of your checkbook to buy groceries, eventually you run out of money to buy food, which is why you don't use them for your operating expenses. I'm going to send this over to Pam for this.
Thank you. This slide talks about the budget deficit history that we've had in the school department. So in FY24, we ended the year with a $4.5 million deficit. Just as a reminder, we used the town offset. The town offset that through one-time reserves, the ARPA money, and the town budget reduction of spending and a hiring freeze on the town side. This year, we're estimating our budget to have about a $3.5 million deficit. Again, the town is helping to propose to offset that through Finance Committee reserves and free cash transfer. For 26, we have $3.5 million and $2.5 million in negotiated that we're accounting for. If we look ahead to FY27, we have an additional 4.5% of, which is about $2.9 million.
This chart shows the fiscal year 26 proposed within capacity within guidance budget. As you can see, it's a 4.04% increase from fiscal 25, with municipal departments increasing by 2.75%, and all town departments, including support services, increased 1%. Of the $132 million budget, about $66 million of that is the schools, and approximately 85 of that. Of the $32 million on the town side, the $32 million on the town side is fixed costs of benefits, debts, and other insurances. And in the $33 million that makes up the town budget, salaries make up approximately $20 million of that. And big ticket items like electricity, heating fuel, snow removal, and trash are $5.2 million alone. This just shows the breakdown of the budget. I know you've all seen me present this every year. It shows the schools at about 48.75%. By the time we go through and credit them with their benefits and the shared services, it's usually sort of between 6% depending on the year. This year we had a lot of budget pressures and changes. Our employee benefits are seeing a 7% increase. Health insurance is $1.1 million increase. Retirement is $734,000. Our liability insurance is increasing by 9%, and our vocational education is increasing. Greater Lawrence is going up by 59% from last year's budget, and Essex North Shore is going up by 18%.
As most of you know, the school budget voted to transmit 4 budgets to the town manager for review. There was the guidance budget. The guidance budget is within the red budget, or guidance, is within our guidance. That's about $64 million, almost $67 million. The orange is level budget, which came in at $71,784,091. This would require a $5 million levy capacity and a $2 million override, or $777.84 to the average single-family home per year. The blue, which is $67,604,962. That uses part levy capacity at $2,746,000, which is a $311 average to the single-family home per year. And the purple budget, which is about $69 million, uses all of the levy capacity, $4,320,000, and it's $407 to the average single-family home.
Ms. Mark, this is the end of our presentation. We're happy to answer any questions, but I think we'll join you at the table.
Yeah, we're going to come to the table if you're done. Yeah. Thank you very much, Melissa. Thank you, Pam. Thank you. So we heard from the executives of each of the departments in our community, the municipal department and the school department. So I think we'll start the discussion, and I invite you, please, to be vociferous and jump in with the chair of the FinCom. Donovan?
Yes.
And what slide do you want to back up?
The last one.
Okay. We're going to arrange that? Go ahead.
Yep. I'm going to borrow this. I feel like you're picking on me because I'm sitting next to you. That's fine. All right, so Donovan O'Connell, I'm on the Finance Committee, and I have a question about this slide directed to my esteemed friends on the School Committee. Let me preface this by saying I greatly appreciate all of the work that you did, and Pam, that you did on these 4 different avenues. From a Finance Committee perspective, we can't get going until you guys put a number out there that we can then poke and prod at. So I'm just curious, because as I think it was Melissa alluded to, our public hearing and when we have to vote on a recommended budget is in a little over a month. So I'm just curious, School Committee, if you could tell us maybe when you might have chosen one of these or a different idea, if that'd be okay.
Yes, Alyssa Koenig, Chair of the School Committee. We have actually just recently set a date within the last 24 hours of February 25th to be able to hold a meeting to select which budget to move forward. So that's going to be held at February 25th at 6 p.m. Location is to be determined.
Great, thank you.
Anybody else have a comment about that matter? Go.
Joe Hicks, School Committee. To start, we know that we transmitted forward. That feels like we might have deferred and not be willing to take a stand. My intention in doing that and supporting that idea was, we also know, I know as a member of the committee that when we go to town meeting, it is best that we all have a common vision for what happens next, and that the articles and the warrant that ends up on the town committee, on the numbers that end up on the town warrant, matter, and we want to have that be clean and understandable to everybody to make sure that the budget that we propose is the budget that people want to support. And I know that we can't do that without the support of Select Board and FinCom. We could just say what we want and be done with it and then push it off to you to say yes or no, but that would not be a kind way to do it, I don't think. It would not necessarily get us
Excuse
to
me,
the
sir.
place.
Folks, I'm going to ask you to please hold any reaction. This discussion is important. It's going to stay at the table, and everybody needs their attention and no distraction. Go right ahead.
I don't think that gets us to our ultimate goal. And while I'm idealistic in many ways, I'm also very pragmatic in making sure that we can get what we need for our kids. I will assert that the guidance budget of $64,858,914 is woefully inadequate and would be devastating to our community. And I would have preferred, and maybe I should have said this last week, for us to not even transmit that one for discussion because it would be so disastrous to our community's ability to educate our kids in a proper way. And my first goal in having this conversation with everybody is to, as much as we can, get rid of that number. Because it's so bad that it shouldn't even be considered a viable option to move forward. And I worry that, having heard about what happened back in 07 and 08 with that town meeting and that budget, the results on education were horrific. We were not talking about 25 kids or 28 kids in a classroom. We're talking about what is the capacity based on the fire department, how many kids can we have in the classroom. We were talking about at 11 o'clock seniors going home because there was no place to put them to have class, or there was no classes for them to take. And that would be just, it's an outlandish proposition that we'd even put ourselves in a position to end up there. So the first thing I want to think about is how do we get rid of the red budget and how do we move towards the other ones. Thank you.
So in addition to what Mr. Hicks,
Your name,
Joe,
please.
I'm sorry, Dave Brown, School Committee. In addition to what Joe just said, my wish for tonight was to become more educated about the ramifications of each of these. And the reason why I wasn't in favor of just putting one forward is I wanted to fully understand from the perspective of the Select Board and the Finance Committee what it would mean, right? Understand the results. For example, if we say we really want the level services budget, how does that impact everything else?
So Dave, ask them.
So yes, so I would like to know tonight, for each category except the red one, what the ramifications are for the other capital, for facilities master plan 2, what happens to that, why everyone, and to be a little bit more specific, there seems to be a concern that going for an override would be a bad idea. But since the problem we have here is not a one-time problem, it feels like it's going to be an ongoing problem. It seems like an ongoing problem would require an ongoing solution, which is what an override does. It's a permanent increase.
So, yeah, Melissa, could you walk us through the ramifications of each?
Yeah.
Is that too much to ask for one? I think
not-
that's sort of what everybody's hinting at,
Right.
Yep.
the next step, if you don't mind.
Sure, absolutely. So if we choose to use the entire
You need
limit.
to get close to the microphone.
Thank you. If we choose to go, I think it's purple, right? Or we choose to use the level service budget, obviously that means that we have to use the entire levy limit. So that takes us to these two major impacts that we spoke about before. We know that we would have to raise taxes by 7.56%, and that we would now have increased debt capacity, increased debt usage for Facilities Master Plan 2. If we decided we wanted to raise for level service, we'd be talking about having an override for another $2 million. So instead of the taxes increasing by $500, it would be $700, because it's about $100 per million raised. So it would be $700 on top of the 2.5%. Those are the two major impacts that I see. I mean, I think that the compounding impact chart is kind of what we have to rely on cost-wise, right? So we know that we would have to do a bigger debt exclusion, we know that we'd be using all of the capacity, so we know that we would be on the gray line. We also know that that gray line would be about $200 more. So instead of 9306 in fiscal year 20, instead of $10,004 in fiscal year 26, it would actually be $10,204. And instead of $10,521 in fiscal year 27, it would be $10,721. And instead of $10,734 in fiscal year 28, if we did an override, it would be about $11,000.
Does that answer your question?
It answers a lot of it, but those numbers you just gave, the additional $200 lift, that's if we did the level services. Right?
That's if we did level services and we went for an override.
So is it, so so that would be the line for level services. The line we see here is?
The gray line is if we went purple and we used all of the levy capacity.
So the gray is the purple budget?
Yes, I should have made that purple. And the orange is if we maintain the current plan. And so the orange represents the 2.5% on taxes, an additional $170 for the Kittredge debt exclusion, which is what it would be if we did not use the levy capacity.
Okay. Okay, so I think I got it, yep.
Melissa,
Thank
can
you.
I ask you just a clarifying question? And that's on the assumption that a debt exclusion would pass by vote next town meeting,
Correct.
right? So there's that possibility that even if we were to pass level services this year, we're not guaranteed we're going to pass a debt exclusion next year.
No, so if we backed that out, you would have to take that, basically, take that $236 off. So if you were going for level service, that gray line right now would represent the override without a debt exclusion on it. Because the override is about the same.
Anybody else at the table? Chris,
Real quick.
please
how-
identify yourself first time.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris Allen, I'm on the Finance Committee.
Closer to the microphone.
Bring the microphone close, is that better? Chris Allen, FinCom. I just wanted to hear again, if we go to the levy, if we spend to the levy limit, how does that affect the Master Plan 2?
Sure. Okay, so if we go to the levy limit and we spend the entire $5 million, we would still have the $24 million in the capacity within the budget to do $24 million worth of debt. We would need an additional $10 million in debt exclusions. So the impact would be $267 per year for 25 years for the average single family versus $170 under the current plan. Additionally, you would have the tax increase for those people as well, so it would be $737 a year. But if you're just thinking about Kittredge, if we stay with the current funding plan, it costs the average single-family home after over 25 years $4,250. If we use the levy capacity and we go to the new funding plan, it costs the average single-family home over 25 years $6,675.
Brian, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, absolutely. Brian Roach, Chair of the Select Board. I guess I'd make both a statement and, a question back to the school committee on this, where we've talked so much about Facilities Master Plan 2, a plan that's been put in place for years. And as we all know, plans change when facts change, right? And the facts on the ground have fundamentally changed. So we need to be open to revisiting the plan. A good chunk of that plan is school facilities. So I guess I would ask the school committee have priorities with regard to facilities in Facilities Master Plan 2 from the school perspective changed. And what are those priorities from the school's perspective?
Want to share a microphone, or another member of the school committee wish to answer?
Could I ask a clarifying question of town manager first? As connected to
Apropos
that?
Brian's
Yes.
question, yes.
We know Kittredge is the next project that was on the plan, as well as Youth Center and Fire Station 2. And then further down the line, can you remind us when the Atkinson and the Franklin projects were slated to happen?
Sure. So this is the original plan that we're looking at right here on the screen right now. Franklin School design was in 33 and construction in 35. The Atkinson design in 26 and construction in 28. If you remember when we created this plan, there was a lot of conversation because it was a 17-year plan, and people were concerned that it took so long. But the reason that it took so long is because we were trying to design a program that had the least amount of impact on residents. So by capturing our debt payments falling off and using the Amazon capacity, we were really able to limit down the number of exclusions we needed.
And if I remember correctly, we were doing some of the more expensive ones first because we were worried about inflation and rising construction costs, making those even more expensive.
Yes.
Control.
So originally, we had a lot of conversation about putting Kittredge first.
Yeah.
But then once we got the MSBA funding and we got on their schedule, obviously it made sense to slow that down because the MSBA reimbursement is approximately 40% to the town so we can wait a little bit for that one. The middle school was the one we did first because it was the most expensive and it impacted the most students, right? Because everybody in the elementary was going to be going to the middle school. So that has been designed, as you know, as you're on the committee, is well into its final weeks, really.
Yeah.
If you remember at the tri-board meeting, one of the things that we talked about is that perhaps needs have changed, right? So we know enrollment's down, we have a new school committee than we had before, and so one of the things that we asked you to look at this year, as we're going into the next fiscal year, is are Atkinson and Franklin still priorities? Could they just be renovations instead of additions? And I think that will help with some of the outer years.
I think it's helpful at this table that we recognize that we're actually talking about a 2-year, at minimum, circumstance. So any conversation about the following fiscal year is going to be welcome. Anybody else wanted to comment?
Well, I think for the school committee, I think one of the big concerns is, you know, we talked about taking Kittredge offline while it's being rebuilt. The concern is if we don't get that debt exclusion for Kittredge, the ability to be able to ever reopen that building is certainly concerning. So I think that is a priority for us to be able to make sure that that building comes back online with the funding that we need to be able to do that.
And we also know that once that happens, that increased capacity is there, and then future renovations at Atkinson or Franklin inevitably will look different. I don't know how they would be different, but they would be different as well.
I'm sorry, excuse me. This is
Kelly, yes?
Yeah, Kelly Cormier, school committee. I apologize for not being there in person, but I am following along. I do, just in terms of you talk about facility master plan 2 and changes, another big part, as was mentioned, is declining enrollment. So looking at, you know, what are the schools that we need to handle, you know, is enrollment going to continue to decline or not? That's certainly something that we have to look at as we would consider reopening schools. What do we need moving forward?
How is that standard determined, Dave?
Well, just to add on to that, similarly, like Brian's question was about, you know, the future of the entire population, right? So is that if that population continues to decline, obviously we would change what we would do at that point. What makes this tricky is the fact that we're going for a big state, 40%, I think you said?
What number? What's that total number anticipated?
The total, oh my gosh.
Laura? There's Laura. Oh,
Right
there
here.
you are, thank you.
Hi, Laura Bates, Select Board. I think we're at 70.
It's a $74 million
$74
project.
million.
And some 40% of that would come
48%.
from the
Yep.
state,
Yes.
in fact,
Would be
the program
reimbursement
moves
from the
forward.
state, yep. So
Okay.
that's a big consideration too. We don't want to lose that funding.
That's exactly right. Ed?
Ed Moskovich, the school committee. So I just want to point out that every child who's going to be in our schools for the next 5 years has already been born. So there's a certain, it's not as uncertain as you might otherwise think. The town clerk has shared with me birth records for the last 15 years, and I've compared birth records with kindergarten enrollment 5 years later. And it turns out that the bumps come in the same place. And so looking at, now, I understand there's the possibility of lots of new children moving, but that's kind of already in the numbers when you're comparing the births in, say, in year 1 with school committee, the kindergarten enroll 6. Anyway, going by that, you can expect that enrollment 5 years from now will be 200 less than it is now, and the capacity of the Kittredge will be 130 greater. So it seems likely that we we won't need as much, we won't need to draw on capital as much as people would have thought 2 or 3 years ago.
Thank you, Jean.
Hi, Jean Irwin.
You need to get very close, Jean. Just put it right to you. There it is.
Jean Irwin, Finance Committee.
No, you need to be louder. You need to be
My
louder.
husband would say.
Yes.
My husband would say that's not a problem.
Pretend you're yelling at me, please. It's quite all right.
Jean Irwin, Finance Committee. One thing I wanted to know, because in relation, I am kind of embedded in several of the districts, that if we look at the PK and K, the enrollment has steadily gone up, and that's the impact of COVID. Those COVID babies are hitting. You know what I mean? That's what they're. So I actually was like, I looked over the enrollment for the last 7 years and what it's actually going to do to the middle school and the high school. And I can see by by FY28, just considering what we have now, and we know we have a drop off usually between 8 and 9. But like currently at the middle school, they have 1,023, but by February 28, it will be 971. So you can see that drop, but what I'm trying to say is be cautious of that, because these COVID babies, because in the many other districts that I talk to, everybody in all the daycares, they're flooded. So it's going to balloon a little bit. So I just want a word of caution.
I think historically, though, we have had...
Excuse me, you need to introduce yourself.
Janice Phillips, Select Board. I think historically, we occasionally do have those bubble years, right? And they will add additional teachers to a certain grade or as needed for a bubble year, right? Is that, okay. Along the same lines as what everybody else is talking about now, I think we need to, is there a chance that we do not get the debt exclusion, Kittredge does not go forward, but do we need to keep Kittredge online in order to accommodate children if our enrollment is going down? Pam?
Yeah, so first to answer your question about enrollment, we do have bubble years. We have a little bit of a bubble year this year in our kindergarten, but just as you said, there's usually a dip someplace else, and so those usually work themselves out, and we are trending downward in enrollment. In terms of if we don't build a new Kittredge school, we can, the purple plan and the blue plan move the current Kittredge students into either the blue plan moves them all into Sargent School, and the purple plan moves them into 3 schools, moves them into Franklin School, Atkinson School, and Sargent School. We can accommodate the current students in those schools. The blue plan does have class sizes at 67, has 67, sorry, I was looking at 67 million, I apologize. 67 would be a lot. 27, the purple plan brings all of our access to gender. So to answer your question, we can still close Kittredge School and move those students into existing schools and have space for them. I think, sort of to go back to the questions about Facilities Master Plan 2, I think at that point we're at the point where we need to collect more data. I think when Facilities Master Plan 2 was created, you were working on different data, and we know that some things have changed, and maybe some priorities have changed, but I think this is a time to be able to collect the new data and really determine if we need to move forward with what is in Master's Facilities Plan 2. As I think Melissa just said, maybe it's not an addition, maybe it's a renovation, or maybe there is, we have talked about the gymnasium at Kittredge School and whether or not that is something that could be moved if they weren't going to utilize the current gymnasium in the plan moving forward.
So, can I ask a question? Lost my train. Sorry.
We'll come back to you.
Anybody want to fill in?
Yeah, give me a second here, please.
Brianna Stetson, FinCom. One thing I'm not hearing us talk about, we're talking about enrollment, makes sense, but how has children's needs changed in the last 5 years? I think we need to consider that as well, because it's not just about enrollment numbers.
It's a great question. I think our children's needs have changed greatly, and also some has been the same. So right, we all know we went through COVID. COVID was challenging in many ways. Our students had to learn to re-engage with each other. We had to learn some resocialization. We had seen an uptick in mental health. So there are some pieces of that. I think one of the things that this district is already well aware of is that we needed to, so I'm going to talk about the primary grades for a minute. We needed to think about the way that we were educating our primary students, and we had to change our literacy curriculum in North Andover, and congratulations and kudos to North Andover for being out front in that work. And being able to do that. So I think the needs of our children changed in that way, and we're already responding to those needs. This is challenging to say because I was a building principal and I know how much a schoolhouse means to a community, right? I know what it means as a leader, I know what it means as a teacher, but I also know as an administrator and as a leader that honestly there are many benefits to moving the students out of Kittredge School into either the 3 schools or the 1 school to be able to meet the needs of our students, because we are seeing our students need some more small group instruction, which will allow us to concentrate on those schools. It allows us to move some of our existing support staff into those schools to be able to so keep the reading teachers, keep the counselors, move them with the students to be able to work on the initiatives that we have moving forward with our students. Your question is so important because that's the heart of education, really, what the needs of our students are and how we're going to educate our students. Now, I don't want anyone misunderstanding or thinking that I'm saying that there won't be a change and this isn't going to be challenging. Social emotionally, it can be challenging to have to change schools. It will be challenging for our high school to have some less electives than what they typically have. But if we plan appropriately and we message appropriately, we can get through those challenges.
Yeah, thank you. I think what's really important that we consider to look at is those needs, right? I'm concerned about shutting down a school building when the needs of our children have changed so much, right? That inherently means the class sizes are going to go up, and I don't think that's going to necessarily help our students with the needs right now.
I understand that. I think we have to remember that our responsibility is to say that a North Andover is a North Andover, and right now we're running a school that has class sizes somewhere between 14 and 21, where all the other schools in our district, well, most of the other schools in our district have larger class sizes. This gives us the ability to afford a consistent grade level size to all of our schools and to be able to support students in that way. So I want to, right, that is the truth. Have been very small class able to have that same, and this gives us an opportunity to do that for all kids. It really, if you look at the purple budget and you look at the class size, it really does level sizes that I don't think North Andover has seen in a long time.
I know this is tough.
Thank you. Your seatmate, Jean?
Thank you. Just to that question, just from 2020 to 2024, the disabilities went from 0.9 to 8. No, I don't want to say a strain. There's more needed. There's more one-to-ones needed. There's more paras needed.
And more.
Another.
Excuse me, I appreciate you for being not helpful. Limit this, and we'll have plenty of time to applaud each other at a later time, okay? Thank you, everybody. Please.
And there's, they break down the percentages of other populations as well. The EL population has exploded in North Andover as well. And also they could consider it students with disabilities and EL or low income. And you could just see a change from 2020. We went from 22% to now 32%. So again, around that, especially with ELs and kids that have learning disabilities or students with disabilities, the cost considerably.
So I'll ask a question. Apparent that there's the prospect of fewer dollars with a need for continuing services. Is there a way, recognizing that there may be fewer dollars spent, that we actually can have initiatives that improve an educational opportunity? Please,
Ed Moskovich, the school committee. So the discussion up until now has sort of been focused on class sizes. We've actually conducted a sort of experiment here. We've been reducing class sizes for without any noticeable increase in performance. The superintendent and the deputy superintendent have begun an initiative to improve instruction. And I had a chance to visit the sergeant's school yesterday, and I guess a broader point is reducing class sizes a way of improving. It happens to be very expensive. And if you look at the data in the area we're talking about, say roughly 18 or 19 to 24, it's sort of linear, it's sort of level. If you class 15, then it starts getting different, extraordinarily expensive. If they start going up much above 24 or 25, then you start having a problem, which is why the superintendent, the purple budget is bends where it sets the limit at 24, 25 related to research. But the way you teach makes a difference. Made a point to parents whenever I have children, and that we have a really whole group of teachers in the district. The vast majority have had a very good experience with them. Teachers always do a good job of teaching the way they teach, but require change in the way they teach, and that's what Pam is asking. What I saw, it's like more wit and wisdom sets higher expectations, begins to introduce more knowledge about the world around them. We've switched just in the last, I guess, 18 months to a much stronger way of addressing students' phonics in the early grades. And all this requires
no, hold on a second. Ed, get closer. Are we good with check? All right, let's try it again. Go ahead. Close.
In different ways. And what I saw.
I'm sorry, I can't hear Mr. Matsevich.
He has to speak closer, to be into the microphone.
Ed, like this, like this.
Really close? Is this
Yeah.
better or worse?
Better.
So there's at least seven teachers. 7 teachers I met, roughly 20% of the faculty there, receive small stipends so that they can mentor their colleagues, come in there, help colleagues, like when you get a new curriculum. It's my hearing. Oh, all right. So I won't hear, but everybody else.
It takes all kinds, everybody. It's just quite all right. Go ahead. We'll do sign language. We'll tell you what's necessary, Ed.
Hey,
so these.
Here. Oh, so it's, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, you can't, you have your hearing.
Oh, I'm not supposed to touch it?
And then it's doing.
Now, that's perfect.
How's that?
Perfect.
All right.
I'll accept that. Thank you.
Anyway, so these are 7 teachers who receive small stipends, and in return, like when a teacher is using a new curriculum and needs some help, some ideas about how to do it, if a teacher needs to know how to use the data to know which students need help and what kind of help they need, if she needs to individualize instruction. And one of the things that I noticed, and many of you know this, but I spent the last 20 years of my career in schools working on improvement, that when teachers begin to see changes, see their students begin to move, they get really excited. And that's what I sense there is 7 teachers out of 35 really excited about the changes they're making. And so I think for people to be sort of depressed that class sizes won't be as low as they might like, you need to think about how teachers are teaching, and we're fortunate to have a team that is putting in place a plan to help, first of all, to help the principals be stronger leaders of their schools, and then to have teachers in the school helping each other. I think there's reason to be really optimistic, and the purple budget, I think the superintendent had this in mind in the way that she set it up.
Is this conversation about consequence helpful to the varying boards? Let's weigh in, please.
Jean, sorry. Jean and Brianna, your comments before, and thank you for highlighting them, and I'm not going to disagree. That's why we need more money. Like, that's the crux of it. The things we need to do for our kids cost more. So we can't do that with $64 million. So we need more. And I appreciate the conversation on consequence. Can we, like, our goal is to have a better understanding of where we go next. And I know we're not going to make formal decisions today, but I also want to get some type of indication that as a school committee, if we support something higher than 64 million, are the other boards going to support us in doing that, or are we going to be out, like, hung out to dry?
You get the right to ask a question, so ask it of
Will
anyone
you
that
all
you wish.
support us in going for more than 64?
I would support
Can we all agree to say no to the red at this point?
Yes, I would love it if the school committee actually did an informal poll right now to say,
yes,
we can drop.
We can drop.
Red. I mean, a show of hands from our school committee.
drop
Can
the
you
red?
drop the red?
Kelly, you're agreeing, right?
I'm raising my hand, yes.
Okay.
So
So
I'm seeing essential unanimity, or at least no objection to the notion of dropping red.
Kelly said yes still.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have the temerity?
Come on, folks.
Do we have the temerity to go a little further and start talking about blue?
Well, how about we go right to the other end and go to...
Go wherever you'd like to go, Chris.
Go to level services. No.
People-
You misunderstand, my friends. I'm saying that go to the other end, level services. Is this something that you guys think the rest of us will handle or not? I'm talking about the school committee. Are you committed to that or are you not? If you're feeling waffly, I understand that, but we could take a poll with you. Is level services something that it is ride or die?
So can I address that?
Please.
So Chris, I think it would be useful for us to all review what the educational ramifications are of each of these things, right?
Okay.
Because that's where I'm personally struggling, right? I want to go for level services. However, in light of everything we've heard tonight, I'm concerned about that for the town, right?
Yep.
As a whole. So I think it would be useful for all of you to hear a summary of what we heard about what the implications are of each. And there is a slide. I know we had a slide for that in the
But
last.
I mean, but to interrupt you
Yeah.
briefly here, I mean,
Okay.
the decision which one of these budgets you want to put forward is truly yours,
Mhm.
okay? It is really yours. So the implications of each one and the educational value and all those things.
Chris, I can't hear you.
All of the implications of all of these different budgets are really, truly yours. And the information that you need, if it's strictly educational, is something that is between you and your superintendent, and to base your decisions on what you think, you have to do, okay? And I sat where you are. A million years ago, I did. So I understand how difficult it is. But that's the sort of thing you have to decide between the five of you. And then once you choose that, then it's up to a board like the Finance Committee, and of course the Select Board too, to say like, hey, that's not going to fly because we need a police station and we need fire and, you know, sidewalks and all of those other things. Right. So like, I don't know, I mean, as much as I understand the educational, want to understand the educational ramifications of everything, it really isn't our decision. It's your decision. Mm-hmm. to choose that. I mean, and the biggest questions I think from you are, how does this affect the rest of the town? You know, what is this budget, you know? And if, so that's what I think, we don't have to go through a whole bunch of time on that.
Okay, but speaking openly and honestly, my worry is, if I, for example, say, Chris, I really want a level services budget because I actually don't even think that's enough. But if I know that that's going to result in the Finance Committee saying they can't endorse it and the Select Board saying they don't recommend it, I don't see the point in that, right? I just don't see the point of doing that. That's my struggle.
Yeah, I hear you.
Hold on, Chris.
Eva Pastor, Finance Committee. I just want to give my opinion on that. I agree with you all. The red is drastic, and that's
Terrible.
definitely a no. The level services, I do not agree with that. I'm leaning more towards the blue or the purple, in my opinion. Purple will probably be better. But again, like Chris stated, this is really for the school committee to decide.
Yeah, and this is Kelly Cormier from the school committee. I would say, based on what I know now, having talked with the members of the committee, hearing from the superintendent, certainly between the blue and the purple, I think gets us to deals with our declining enrollment, gives the economy a scale of closing Kittredge, allows the superintendent to get our class sizes to 25 at our elementary schools, and allow to focus with teacher leaders and focusing on the quality of education, not just focusing on class size, but the quality of education. I think if we could get somewhere between the blue and purple, that would be the right thing for our district.
Yeah, so
I want to jump in on there. My concern with this orange level services budget is it going to be sustainable? Maybe this will get us through 1 year, but what about FY27? What about FY28? And I just don't see it as being sustainable for our students to be able to provide them in the long term everything that they're going to need. It's going to fall off a cliff again, and we don't want to be in the same positions that we have been in.
So to that end, could I ask the superintendent and I guess to some extent the town manager to talk about level services budget, and if we went with that this year, what impact does that have on fiscal year 27 and 28? And then how does it affect the taxpayers? Which I know Melissa, you have mentioned numerous times already, but I think it's worth repeating.
And can I ask one additional ask to that? I think seeing the impact to the taxpayers annually is great. Most people don't financially plan like that. So I think it'd be really helpful to understand the impact monthly as well. I think that's just easier for people to contextualize.
To add some just context to, the town manager is getting ready to answer your question. I think it's also important that level services this year and that number of $71 million is based on our $4.5 and $3.5 million of being over what we budgeted the last couple of years. Yeah. This is my third year on the committee and third time I'll be involved in voting for a budget. The first year, the budget that the committee voted on was $60.3 million, and then last year was $62.06 million. And going up to 71, so going up to the 64 is a 4.5% increase, and we need to recognize that would be in any other year a very good thing. When we did level services last year, I think it was around 4%. That was
5.5%, I think.
5.5%, and that was an enormous thing that we did. So we need more money, and I want it to make it good for kids. But I'm also recognizing that that's a huge leap to go from the first time I vote for a budget being 60 million to asking for 71 in a 3-year span is a significant increase. And thank you to the FinCom and the Select Board for helping us make it through those 2 budget deficits. And part of coming up with what level services is for next year, it was an exercise in making sure that we could have a transparent, accurate account of what we actually spend. Because if we don't have that, we can't do any good budgeting. Nothing, it's all made up. And we don't want to do that. We want to have numbers that are real. I just want to keep that in perspective as well, that is a huge thing.
Ask away, and then I'm going to direct.
Well, actually, I was
get a directed answer.
I think I was going to move to do exactly what you were doing, so I'm sorry for jumping my
would you like my
facilitation.
job?
No,
You're welcome.
I apologize.
No, don't apologize. You're welcome to it.
Yeah, Nancy Saros, Finance Committee. I think the other consideration here is, especially when we talk about the level services budget, is the appetite for the town for an override. And this group of people could very easily say, yes, we want to go for the level services budget, but if there's very little likelihood that the town would pass that, I mean, people are facing inflationary pressures right now, people are losing their jobs right now, there's all kinds of things in the broader environment, and I think we just have to ask the question of whether that would likely go over before we selected that option that involves an override.
So we appreciate the commentary that's made. We're going to ask Pam and Melissa to provide some facts to us right now in terms of direction.
Okay, so to Joe's point, I think the exercise in finding the level service budget was very valuable for the school committee, for myself, for the school department. I want to remind us all that we did not have a clear direction or a clear understanding of the amount of money that we were spending for our schools. We learned through the CLA report that we didn't have a lot of historical data, and so we didn't really know what we were spending, which is really difficult to say. So I think that the level service budget gives us an opportunity to know what we're spending our money currently on and how much it would cost if we continue to spend our money on those things currently and move them forward. That said, one of the things that we didn't have the opportunity to do is look at what we're currently spending our money on and see if there are some efficiencies and ways that we might be able to spend it differently, move some of that money. There may be some things that we would have naturally brought forward to say that were not needed, or that we're not using that in the way, or it's not being as efficient as we'd like to see. So we're looking at some efficiencies that we might be able to change as we're moving forward. It's a big jump to go from, what do we have right now, $62 million to running the district to $71 million. But again, I just want to remind us that I think it was an exercise that we needed to do so that we knew where we were spending the money. I think that's one of the things that the school committee has struggled with all year, and questions that have come to me is, really, what are we spending our money on? Why is this not matching? And I have to imagine, as a person that's watching this and has watched the budget seasons, it's frustrating because everything looked like it was going to be enough money. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. So, of course, as the superintendent of schools, I want as much money as we can have for the school budget. I would love $100 million to be able to run the district. There are lots of things that I would be able to do. I have a whole list of things that we would want to be able to do with the district. The district has done incredible work, as Mr. Moskovich, as Ed has already said, in terms of literacy with Wit and Wisdom. But we have also working with the Hill for Literacy, which is a company that comes in and is helping us to analyze our data, to look at our data, to make informed instruction with our data. We're holding data team meetings. We're doing that in the elementary and the middle school. Not the Hill for Literacy, but looking at data. We've been able to move our DIBELS testing from a paper pencil task to a computerized test.
Explain what a DIBEL is.
Sorry, DIBELS is, it's an early intervention testing to help us understand if our students are on target for meeting their reading skills, and it can also be an early screener to see if our students may potentially be students who we might want to look further to see if they have dyslexia. You broke my flow.
Blame the DIBELS.
Right, I'll blame the DIBELS. So I guess what I really want people to understand is we would always advocate for as much money as we could have, because I think Jeannie pointed out our special ed numbers have risen. I think they're rising to the point where they're above the state average right now. We do have a high number of students who receive English language support in our district. We also have the Urban Collaborative. The school committee wisely put together a special education advisory council that's working very closely to unpack the Urban Collaborative and to make recommendations. I think that we can take, if you look at the purple budget, I'm going to advocate for the purple budget. If you take the purple budget and you think of it as a slightly smaller level service budget, we can continue to improve instruction because the purple budget does not take away any of the work that we're doing in our schoolhouses to work in terms of improvement instruction or the curriculum work that we're doing. And with the closing of the Kittredge School, reallocating some of our staff, we can provide better services or more services to the students that need it. It gives us time to evaluate, look at some of the efficiencies, and use the funds that we're receiving in a more efficient way.
Excuse me. Folks at the table who have not yet spoken, any questions or commentary about what we've just heard? Go right ahead, please.
Yes, of course you can.
Either way, I'm happy to. All right, as long as you can hear me. I think that Alyssa's concerns about sustainability are very legitimate. If you look at the 4% COLA plus the steps for next year, we're talking about $2.9 million for salaries, correct, for teacher salaries, for education salaries. And if you look at this year's budget, right, fiscal year 25 is $62 million. The 4.4% brought them to $64 million, which it wouldn't even cover that, right? When we're talking about Proposition 2.5, we know that new growth is going to be leveling out. The $1.3 million this year is actually more than what we're forecasting to see in future years, talking about going back to the $750,000 number, the $850,000 number. So as we talk about these budgets, I think that it's important to think about how we create a sustainable plan. And I don't know if using the orange budget, which uses all levy capacity and goes for an override, is the smartest long-term solution, because we really need to think about how we plan for next year. And I would hate to be in a situation where we're having this conversation again next year because we don't talk about that tonight.
What specific, can you, not specifically, but generally speaking, can you talk about the problems we'll face next year at this same table if we went with the orange budget?
If we went with the orange budget, sure. So we'd be in a situation where...
And assume it passed. Assume we did it and assume everything passed, the override passed.
Yeah, okay. So basically what we would face next year is a lot like what we would face this year, unfortunately, because the COLA is about the same, right? We talked about a 3.5, I think, for fiscal year 26. You're talking about a 4 in fiscal year 27. We're not seeing fixed costs slow down. So I think, one of the problems that we face is that as a community, we are impacted by the rules and regulations of Proposition 2.5, meaning, as I explained before, we can only increase our taxes by 2.5% plus whatever little new growth we have. And when your fixed costs, like liability insurance or retirement, are going up by 7 or 9, that greatly impacts how much we can spend on operations. So some of this is me preaching about a state issue, right? But I think it's something we all need to think about as we're moving forward, because if we continue to see the fixed cost increases, that means less and less and less for operational. Historically, what the former superintendent and former deputy superintendent would tell me is that level service for them was about 3.6%. The 3.6% would be good for next year where we would be, but it's less than 4. So I just want to be sure that we're kind of considering that.
I've got a question. So I hear what you're saying about if we go to the level services, we do all of that you're concerned about it being unsustainable. But why would a lesser budget be more sustainable? That's the part I'm having trouble wrapping my head around. And it makes sense, right?
So, the bugaboo is, right, there'd still be levy capacity to go for, there'd still be Amazon levy capacity available. If we went with the blue budget, we'd only be spending 2.7 of the $5 million, which would mean that in next year, there'd be an additional $2.3 million that these 3 boards could determine as a policy to use, right? And that's the determination. Have we changed our minds from the last meeting that we want to use this $5 million to offset the budget? I can't answer that question, right? My job is to administer the decisions you all make. But that's what we need to decide. If we move forward with the $71 million budget, or even really the 69, we do run into a situation where we don't have any additional capacity to go for next year, and we'll be back here again, having this conversation again.
Salaries go up, it's all people,
No, we get that.
it's all people.
So Melissa, if I can maybe interpret, you're suggesting perhaps a more measured approach is a little bit more sustainable and essentially lies within the purview of these boards as policy decisions, rather than taking a risk of an override at town meeting in an election, that we can kind of control the way we raise the water, and the control that how we impact the schools. And I do think, and I think this discussion is helpful, that fiscal 26 is one thing, but it's not happening in a vacuum. Fiscal 27 is a real issue, and I think one of the things that I'm concerned about is not just the the negotiated step increases or COLA increases. It's what do we do with Kittredge, right? Let's say we go with the purple budget, which still temporarily relocates Kittredge students, and then forces us to go to a debt exclusion, a larger debt exclusion. So I guess my question for the committee is, do you want to take that chance that a larger debt exclusion passes, right? Or are we changing our likelihood that we're going to actually achieve that debt exclusion next town meeting? I don't know that anyone here is actually going to know the answer to that, right? But when we're going for another $10 million on top of what we already need, and there's a lot of questions around, what's been going on. I think it's risky in that sense. Whereas we can control it within capacity, we can plan better because it's more certainty for all of us. Is that fair to say?
Folks who have not spoken? Ed.
So I just want to point out, to sort of remind us all that we all can make a decision about what we ask for, but actually the voters have to decide either at town meeting and for the level service budget, probably at an override. And as you said, Mr. Moderator, Mark, sorry, Sir Mark.
I'll accept that. That's all right.
That we should think about this sort of in a 2 or 3 year period. I think there is a very powerful argument to be made that this is not a particularly good year to go for an override. First of all, there's almost no history of people going in any town deciding at the end of February that you're going to have an override vote and winning it in May. And second of all, something that the superintendent, that Pam said, she's not been here all that long. And, people have pointed out to me, and it's certainly true, that compared to almost every single comparison town that Melissa has done, if we spent at that level relative to our need, we'd be spending $4, $8, $10 million a year more. But we would need, so at some point, we probably should think about going to the voters and saying, look, there's a whole lot of things in the school system that really need to be worked on. But until Pam has had a chance to think through what we're now doing that we don't need and what things we aren't doing that we really should need, it's just, when we finally go to the voters and say, your schools are worth investing in, we really should do our homework. And I don't see how we can do that in 3 months. So if you're thinking that maybe a year from now or 2 years from now, we ought to come with a well-considered plan of what we can, just what I said, what we can do without what we really need to invest in, with enough time to prepare and organize and possibly to do this in connection with other needs in the town, that would make sense. But to me, the difference, the orange budget, as Pam has said, we can make progress with that budget. And to risk going to an override and losing it, it doesn't make sense to me. And so I think, thinking ahead, do we sometime need an override? Yes, I think we probably do. This would not be a particularly good year to do it.
Mark, may I ask one point? We've now collectively, I think, thrown out the red budget, but for just a logistical purpose, it still needs to come as part-time meeting, or no? It does not? Okay.
No.
Just to make sure I understood.
I can answer that question. So at town meeting, there'll be a representation of the select board, in effect, approving a very specific budget. There will be a recommendation from the school committee for the school committee's budget, but the motion that will be heard will be the recommendation of the finance committee. Please, go ahead, Nancy.
If we leave, yes.
Wrestle it away from
I'm happy to give it up. I was just going to say, if we decide collectively today that the red budget is no longer what the tri-board wants, the red budget will be removed from the proposed budget book. We will no longer have the red budget. We will have the orange, the blue, and the purple budget, unless when we get to a, be nice, knock some more out, useless paper. But my marching orders when I leave here tonight is to remove the red budget from my book.
That's progress.
So I have a town meeting question.
Yes.
Right. So as I just heard.
Who are you going to ask?
What's that?
Who are you going to ask?
It's both you and,
Right,
and Melissa. So what I think I'm hearing is that if we went for either purple or blue, we're going to use some of the extra levy. Either way, we're using levy capacity. In one case, some of it. In one case, almost all of it. That requires an approval, right? If that approval doesn't come, then what happens?
So if we present one item at town meeting, if we don't have columns, if we don't have multiple articles, right, as a budget could be voted at any amount up to the levy capacity, right, up to that $5 million number, up to even $700,000 more than the purple budget. So as long as we're underneath the levy, that budget would pass and that budget would rule. If we're unable to pass the budget at town meeting, meaning we leave town meeting, we don't have a budget, then we have to go to a month-to-month budget based on the budget of the year before.
Okay, so now the town meeting question. Is it possible to propose a sequence of articles to kind of cover that? You see where I'm going? In other words, could we propose an article, just for example, does the purple budget, but in the event that fails, can there be another article right behind it that proposes the blue one?
Town meeting has the ability to be irresponsible if it wishes, and the town meeting will not control whether or not the Department of Revenue will actually approve what has happened, okay? So we'll be forced to come back to a town meeting other than the circumstance where there is a properly formed motion and a direction from town meeting itself that says, by example, we would like you to go to the voters with the purple budget at the moment, with the orange budget, the level services budget, and if that fails, then we will revert to a budget that we will pass in case that happens.
So we could do that.
So we can do that. It's going to take some structure in terms of how that's presented, but that can be done at town meeting as long as the members of town meeting
agree.
Okay. Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Nancy Sarro, Finance Committee. It seems like we're coming down to the blue or purple, maybe something in between. So I think it might be helpful for me, and maybe for others as well, to get a summary of the difference between those two. I mean, I can see the numbers, in one case, Kittredge goes to 3 schools, in one case it goes to 1 school, but just more of an operational or a summary of the impacts, something a little bit more than just numbers, what maybe the school committee or the superintendent's view is of one versus the other. Like, I don't personally understand the impact on kids if they got distributed to 3 schools versus 1. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I'll suggest to you that we can certainly try to outline that, but that's going to take a deeper conversation at your table, at the FinCom table, when you invite the school committee and the superintendent to justify that. So you'll have hours and days and even weeks to do that.
And there's a nice chart.
But we can go right ahead.
Yeah, just an overall summary. Like, yes, I could see the numbers in the book, but just some kind of more of a qualitative as opposed to a quantitative assessment.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Pam did give us something in her presentation where she said.
You need to.
Pam gave us a slide in her presentation where, are you looking for like quantities of what? Did they just, okay, there it is.
That's it. It's up on the screen. And Pam.
Sure, but what this is, it's broken down by cost center. So this is pre-KK. So this shows you we don't have to look at the guidance budget anymore. Level services, there's no change. The blue budget, it's 16 teachers in pre-K to 5. 4 teaching assistants, 1 counselor. We have lead teacher stipends, that's what Ed was speaking about. Reductions to our school budgets, staff stipends, again, that was speaking to some of the things that Ed spoke about, and that we would shift the Kittredge School, all of the students from the Kittredge School would be reassigned to the Sargent School. The purple budget for elementary would reduce the 16 teachers to somewhere between 10 and 12. As we're getting closer to the numbers, as we're looking at the collective bargaining agreements, I put a range there because we all know that some teachers may not be on the higher end. We would lose no teaching assistants, we would not lose a counselor, we would not lose those stipends positions, we would not reduce the school budgets, we would not, and we would still close Kittredge, and the change would be that we would shift our students to the Sargent, the Franklin, and the Atkinson. And one of the reasons that this shift was made was we talked a lot about neighborhood schools, and while it's not the neighborhood of Kittredge, it's looking at where our Kittredge students currently live and shifting them to the school that it's the closest neighborhood school to where they live. This looks at the class size, so it just shows you a range of the class sizes if we were to go with, this is the purple budget. At the middle school, if you look at the 67 million or the blue budget, it was 8.5 teachers. And when I say teachers, that includes our content teachers, our core teachers, same in the elementary classroom teachers, and in this one would be related arts, and in the elementary it's what we would call specialists. So it's 8.5 teachers, 1 counselor. We gain back our academic coaches. So we gain back our, I'm not going to read it all for you, so I'll just go through the losses. 8.5 teachers, 1 counselor, and half a library media specialist, and a reduction to the office staff in the blue budget. At the middle school, if we were moved to the purple budget, it would be a range of 6 to 8 teachers, 1 counselor, and reduce the office staff. So we bring back our academic coaches, we bring back our teaching assistants, we bring back our library media specialists, and we bring back school budgets. At North Andover High School, in the blue budget, it's 10 teachers, 10% reduction to athletics, a 10% reduction to our Scarlet Knight Academy, and a reduction of office staff. In the purple budget, that's the range moves to 7 to 9 teachers and a reduction to office staff. So the purple budget sees no loss to athletics or Scarlet Knight Academy. In special education, in the blue budget, that's a reduction of 4 teaching assistants. In the purple budget, there's no reduction to special education. System-wide, in the blue budget, we were cutting some of our curriculum work that we do, and we have IT summer help that was going to be cut. In the purple budget, there's no cut to system-wide to those 2. In the blue budget, 67 million for maintenance. It was a reduction of a half-time custodian. In the purple budget, there's no reduction to maintenance. Central office staff. In the blue budget, we are reducing our expenses in central office, and we are reducing 1 central office staff. In the purple budget, we continue to reduce our expenses at central office, and we continue to reduce the central office staff.
Thank you. So the purple budget, the blue budget, does that meet the class goal sizes that the school committee has set?
It doesn't. It does with the parameters in the directives. The school committee still had a desire for our class sizes to be between 18 and 25, but in the budget directives, they changed it to willing to go to 27 if necessary. In the blue budget, it has class sizes of 27.
Okay. And so what is your view on sort of student outcomes, things like that, and the more qualitative or softer results with one versus the other? Like,
27 students is a lot of students in a classroom. And once you have 27, you start to creep into 28, and 25 students is more palatable. The range, I think, is between 19 and 25 in the purple budget. It's still hard. Teaching is a hard job. No one is going to say that it's not. Our students have a lot of expectations on the teachers in the classroom. Our teachers have needs. But we, with the purple budget, are able to keep our support staff to be able to support our teachers in the classroom with using different teaching methodologies, using small group instruction. We're able to break students into small groups. I think a 25, I taught a 25 class. I think lots of people who are teachers in this audience can tell you they've taught a class of 25, and it's much more palatable than a class of 27.
Okay, that's what I was looking for, more your view on it, the more qualitative assessment of it. Thank you.
Can I just ask a quick question? Have we done any sort of risk analysis for some of these? So for example, the nursing budget. What's the risk of getting rid of a nurse? Because I just know medical needs of children have also changed. You know, more kids are getting diagnosed with ADHD that need medication administered. There's more food allergies.
So
I'm
all of
just
these
curious.
budgets, so both the blue and the purple budget, I met with all of our building leaders and our curriculum leaders. We have a director of nursing, we have a director of social emotional learning. We're able to meet the needs of our students with the reductions that we show in those budgets.
Laura.
So I just, another thing to add.
Into the microphone.
Another thing to add about the level service. I don't have hearing aids. Not yet, anyway.
It's Ed's fault.
The level service going for an override this year,
Closer.
potentially having to go again, be at this table again next year. And the impact of Kittredge and the new building that we have on the horizon and that impact that it's going to have on our students. The facilities that will improve.
Positive impact,
The
you mean.
positive impact, right? So I think we need to be mindful of that, our decisions moving forward, and hopefully not lose the debt exclusion for Kittredge so that we can provide, I mean, I don't know that everybody's been in Kittredge, but it'll be such an improvement for our students.
I'll go on the record to say we wholeheartedly need a new Kittredge school. Kittredge School, the new Kittredge School is going to house 120 more students than we currently have in that space. It's going to have all of the appropriate classrooms that we're looking for our students. It's going to benefit us in many, many ways. We wholeheartedly need a new school in this district.
Because the last time we built an elementary school was in the 90s.
Correct.
And I just want it long-term, right? And my kids are going to be out of this elementary school when Kittredge is built, but I think long-term for our community, it's so important.
Quick comments, and I think we're ready after an hour and a half to go to the audience. Anybody else? But it's your meeting, so if you want to stay here and just discuss
I
amongst
just want to
yourselves,
make a
it's all
quick
right.
comment that between the purple and the blue budget is a difference of approximately 10 to 12 greater reduction in staff at the blue budget than the purple budget. And something I hadn't really thought about till my visit yesterday to the sergeant, that when you lay teachers off, you don't have a whole lot of flexibility. There's a union contract and pretty strict rules about who gets to stay. And I think there are good reasons for it. But if we get the reduction in staff down near the normal turnover, it means that we will avoid a certain chaos. If you force reduction way below normal, then there's all kinds of teachers are going to move from one school to another, and that will be itself very disruptive. And so one of the differences, subtle difference between the purple and the blue is the substantial reduction in the amount of churning around.
Nancy says thank you. Chris Allen, I think.
I just wanted to make a quick comment about, the closing of the Kittredge School. The Kittredge School, has been a wonderful community. I live right next to it. I love the school. It's a tiny little school, and I would love to keep a school there. However, because of the population of the students that has been going on for not just this year, but for quite a few years, the population has reduced. Does North Andover really need 5 elementary schools? I'd say right now the answer is no, and I think the answer was no maybe 3 years ago, but it was never acted on. So it happens to be that we got the funds for a new school at that location for the Kittredge, so that is the place to build a school, but it doesn't mean that we will necessarily have 5 elementary schools after that. There are other schools in the town that are also rather ancient. So it opens up a huge swath of opportunities of what to do with this wonderful new building, particularly if we raise the school and put the new school properly on the property where it's supposed to be and have the fields where they're supposed to be, you've got this beautiful new building that is larger than the other one and can absorb so much of the rest of the town, and perhaps have 4 elementary schools instead of a whole bunch of at least 3 really old and schools that do not service our students.
Ryan? Yeah, well, just to build on that point, I think this is a great reminder that we're not talking about cutting a budget. We're talking
That's
about
right.
investing back in our community.
That's
And that's
right.
what this really opportunity is, finding a way that we can continue to move forward and invest back in our community in a fiscally responsible way. But I did have 2 questions that I think kind of got spurred by some of Ed's comments. One is, has there been a look at a broader redistricting of the elementary schools in general, right? Because I think there's never a convenient time to do it. There's never a good time for a student to do it. So I don't know if that's something that's been, overall, looked at in general. Just one more follow-up question for Pam, if you mind. When we talk about reductions in staff, we're not going to the music program, right? Yeah. When we talk about reductions in staff, have you done any kind of assessment as to how much of that is an actual layoff versus
Could I
attrition?
ask somebody to be kind enough to walk out to the corridor and ask them to quiet down a moment? Thank you.
They're good.
Yeah. Oh, was it? Oh, okay. Thank
We
you.
have not looked at a larger redistricting plan yet. I think that's probably something that we're going to have to talk about when the Kittredge School is built. See it being proactive. Kittredge School is going to Kittredge School is going to be built. But no, we didn't look at that as we were doing this budget season. And what was your second question? Oh, your second question was about how many teachers might we have to lay off where there's attrition and what that might look like. We are in the beginning stages of looking at that, I'll be honest with you. But I will be honest, though, when you close a school and you have teachers that are teaching there, by nature of moving them into new positions, that will cause some of that moving about, not to the effect that it would have if we were looking at the other bill, the other budget. But we're just in the beginning stages of looking at that. So some of the things that we do is we have staff that are on a leave of absence. So we have reached out to all of our staff to see if their intention is to apply again for leave of absence, or if they're going to separate from service with us. We are finalizing any retirements that we don't already know about. There are some people that have put in for potential, so we've reached out to those staff, asking them for a deadline so that we can, just as you all have said, minimize the amount of reductions.
Rosemary and I are the 2 folks here with very long service to this community. We've seen this movie before, and Rosemary would like to comment.
Rosemary Smedili. Back several years ago, we bought a big piece of land out country for a school. It's now just a field. So I think that we should put some thought into building a school there, or, this is probably blasphemy, or sell the land. That's one thing, but also too, I've, through working as a member of the Finance Committee and then as a member of the Board of Selectmen, the override has been tossed around a lot. And they often would fail, but the one that passed was the one that offered things that the town needed in different departments. So it brought people together, and it passed. So it's just another way of thinking of how do we get what we need for the departments that that they've needed for a while or whatever. And then I think Chris will remember that as well. And put a package together and see if that's what does it for the town, to make the town move forward. You can't go in with, high goals and lots of spending, because that'll fail faster than they can print it on paper. So But, so this is what we were talking about, because we didn't add Chris, but Chris was part of all of that, and it did pass.
We're too old, Rosemary.
We are too old. I just had a birthday 2 days ago. Thanks for reminding me.
Happy birthday.
So just something to keep in the back of everybody's mind, that when the time is right, you've got to really reach out to the citizens and see what they think is important to them and that they're willing to pay a little bit more money for. So.
Thank you.
Okay.
So speaking of citizens, are we ready to go listen to some questions? I'll be requiring answers from you, and then we'll come back to the table for a wrap-up discussion. We ready for that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. It's been enlightening. Thank you all very much. I appreciate your attentiveness. The conversation now turns to the audience for questions to the boards. Residents will have first priority, so we're going to hear only from residents. Please state your name and residential address for the record prior to speaking. You will have no more than 1 minute to ask a question. Please do not disguise the question as a comment. We won't accept that. We're going to move directly to questions, and I will endeavor to assure that you get an answer to that question as well. Please note that, as I said, statements will not be allowed. We're trying to get to solutions, not score points relative to opinions of the moment. And I'm going to suggest that we have as informal a tone as possible, as you've seen demonstrated here by these boards. Ask you, please, direct your question to me, but if you know that you would like one of the specific boards or an individual to speak to it, you may include that in your commentary. So we'll go right here first. 1 hour from now, we will commence.
My name is Stephanie Frazier, and my
Welcome.
address is 28 Empire Drive. I understand lots of conversations have been talking about Kittredge, which should be a lot of conversations. I think a good conversation to have is also about the middle school. Looking at the board up here about the reductions in staff in middle school, the middle school just got a nice new wing, and with the nice new wing was supposed to come 8 to 10 new teachers. And that is no longer happening. And now looks like we're going to get rid of another 6 to 8 teachers. So that is a lot of teachers that are less in this middle school. A lot of other towns...
You need to ask a question.
Yep, I'm coming to it, sorry.
Let's do it now.
A lot of other towns have programs like STEM, robotics, engineering. The middle school does not. With these budget cuts, how are we going to come up with getting our kids in need with these kind of needs that they should have going
We hear
into
your
their
question.
future?
Thank you very much. Who wishes to answer that? I think the school committee.
Is that a minute?
Pam?
Yeah, I'll answer that. So that's a great
Thank
question.
you.
That's a conversation that I've had with building leadership at the middle school. What I talked about gives us some opportunity to potentially do some restructuring, but looking at the related arts, STEM for one is something that Principal Gonzalez has talked about, and it is something that will be part of our long term to bring those positions to the middle school as we recover from this deficit time period.
Thank you very much. Next question, please.
Thank you. Erin Harris, 135 Stevens Street. My question focuses on how do we get there in bridging this monetary gap. And in the free cash best practices slide, it referenced that if we're going to be spending free cash on next year operational expenses, that it is prudent to place a percentage restriction on the total free cash to be used. So my question for you is, what percentage of free cash can you live with us using?
Fair question, and I might ask the manager and/or any member of the board of the select board.
So my opinion is that free cash should never be used to offset your operating costs. That's pretty much how we got into the situation we're in right now, is that we were using ESSER grants, which were COVID grants that came to the schools to pay for salaries, which we were advised not to do. And then we used that, it ran out, and over the last 2 years, we've used, again, one-time revenue sources that have now been depleted, like the opera funds, to continue to offset that. If we use free cash to offset the budget this year, all we really would be doing would be creating a bigger hole for next year. And that's why I've kind of tried to push the fact that we need a strategy moving forward. I would not advise that that strategy would be to include free cash as a revenue source.
Brian? Oh, I'm sorry. Janice?
As it is, in order to close the gap for this year, we're already going to be dipping into our reserves to do that. And for me personally, when I think about what is happening in this country right now and the uncertainty of any federal funding and things like that, and I'm not sure if we know this, but we tend to, we love natural disasters in North Andover, and they're very expensive. So it's not a comfortable thing at all to spend our reserves when we're basically at the level that the state asks us to be at. Now, there are other communities that have far way above that level, and that would be a different conversation, but we have to be financially responsible, and knowing that over the last few years we've had to use that money, and I don't see, and Melissa can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see anything coming down the road that's going to help us to refill those buckets. And I think that's, like, we've known, in the past we've used it, but we've known something else was coming that would sort of refill the bucket. And I'm very concerned about spending it without having a means to refill the bucket.
Sure. So I think a lot of what we refilled the bucket with was the Amazon permit fees,
exactly.
Right? And that's how we kind of got to the number of free cash that we've been carrying. I mean, one thing to really think about is that as we're going towards this town meeting, we have certified $9 million in free cash. We will be spending about $6 million of it. Over $1 million will be used to offset the fiscal year 25 school deficit. It's not ideal, but with snow and ice where it is right now, plus our fires, we are going to need to have the Finance Committee reserve for that, the $500,000 that's left. So, we know there's going to be a free cash article this year, which means that free cash won't get carried.
Any other commentary at the table?
Yeah, and I think
very
just,
quickly, please.
Yeah, as a matter of policy, and I think Melissa said this a number of times, we set these prudent financial policies in good times so that we're able to adhere to them when times get really tough. And now would not be the time to abandon those. If we feel as a community that we need to spend more money, we shouldn't borrow against our future in order to do that. We should push for more money and go for an override. That would be the preferred path. I don't think we abandon sound financial policies because they're here to support us when things do get tough.
Sir.
Good evening, Andy Tarsi, 88 Johnson Street.
Welcome.
Thank you. I want to first just commend the members, the volunteers up on the stage and the collaborative spirit, and also for letting go of the red budget and that we never have to look at it again, which I think was a victory tonight. Thank you. My question is this: I'd like to see, as much as this may feel strategic and we're in a tactical pickle, I would like to see that we reframe, if we can, around what we want for our kids. And I haven't heard in this process over the last few weeks of all the emails and the conversation of the model, whether it's benchmarked against another district or another part of the country, or it's our own independent vision of what does the amazing future district look like and how much does it cost. And I don't even know what that looks like, and it feels really sad to be in a prosperous and intelligent community with such great government, and yet all we're talking about is staving off damage to the children and to the community.
Thank you.
As opposed
Thank you,
to
sir.
even what we aspire to. So I'd like to hear what that benchmark community or that
We heard that, sir. Excuse me, sir.
Number is.
Sir, we heard the question.
Thank you.
And you can save the compliments for a later time so it doesn't impinge on your 1 minute question time.
Thanks.
But you're very welcome. Who wants to answer that question? Pam?
Sure. It's a great question. I think it's
Thank
the
you.
work that we have to do in our district. I think it's the work that the school committee and the town has to do. I think we have to revisit our strategic plan. We need to come together as a community, decide what our priorities are so that we can move forward to achieve those priorities. Honestly, we're working off of current strategic plans, and we are, but that's work that has to be done. I think that everybody here at this table would agree that we need to lay out a 3 to 5 year plan for what we want to see our district. We have work that's in progress. Our high school is working diligently on the Portrait of a Learner, which really is going to drive that work and helping us understand what we want to see our students be, who we want our students to be, and what we want them to be able to do by the time they graduate from North Andover High School. So that work has begun, but there's much more to do.
Anybody else?
Hello, Andrew DeVore, 75 Forest Street.
Welcome.
Thank you. The school budget constitutes about 50% of the town budget, but the only cuts that are being discussed, at least tonight, are teachers in the schools. And the discussion around levy capacity and overrides, at least vis-a-vis the school budget, seems to just assume that all the other departments' budgets are just what they are. But the differences in the school budgets on the table is around $5 million or so. So my question is, why are we only talking about cuts to schools and not looking at the entire town budget to address town-wide priorities? And if the school committee only transmits the level services budget, does that force a discussion about the entire town budget that seems to be lacking?
Thank you, sir.
So as I mentioned, the town budgets were only able to increase by 1.98%. We actually cut $1.3 million in order to do that.
Any other commentary? You're allowed. I'm going to allow you the opportunity for a redirect.
But my question wasn't answered. If the school committee transmits only the level services budget, does that force the tri-board and the finance committee to look at all of the other budgets and not put the entire burden on the schools?
Got that. Gentlemen?
I don't have an answer to that question. I think the finance, I think if they transmitted a level services budget, the finance committee would examine that budget and how it impacted the town moving forward in this fiscal year and other fiscal years, and that may or may not, I can't say for certain, open up the discussion to other parts. But I think, but just as the town manager just said, we just cut the budget on the town side by $1.9 million. 1.3, sorry.
Ryan?
Yeah, it's a fair question, right? And I think what I would suggest is we do this all the time. We are always looking at ways to be tight on the town budget. We run incredibly lean. I think if you ask anyone in DPW, they would tell you we run incredibly lean. We've got potholes to fix. We have a lot of priorities throughout the community. And I think the point of this meeting today, and I don't want us to stray down this path, is to not pit town side versus school side. That's not what's happening here. The fact of the matter is that the town budget is managed incredibly tightly, and we are always talking about cuts on the town side. They just don't get necessarily the same amount of attention as they may otherwise. But we've worked very hard with our other public safety departments. Everyone has been really chipping in, especially in the last couple of years when there's been spending freezes to solve overspending issues in the school because there was not appropriate planning the last few years. We had a plan that was just spent through, so everyone had to pitch in. As we're going to continue to do regularly, every single year, we are all in this together. You may not hear that discussion about the rest of the town budget, but it is happening every single time that we evaluate this.
Joe?
And I think like one point of clarity I think is really important as well is, yes, the school budget is about 50% of the overall budget, but that does not count some of the shared costs, which really brings our share up to 64%. 65. So I think it's important that we also acknowledge that the town, the community is investing a lot. Whether it's enough, I don't know, probably not. But in terms of the percentage that we're putting in, like the schools are getting a sizable portion of what the town is raising right now through the levy, and like other people would argue, and I hear this other places, the town also has the priorities that they want to accomplish, and there's other people in town that have important services that the town needs to attend to as well, and that's important that we recognize those. People will say, but if we give to this, if you take more money for the schools, that's going to be minus something from one of the other departments. And like, my job is to advocate for kids and to do what's best for them, but I'm also, as a citizen, aware that that is a consequence. And so we just have to keep all that in mind and be mindful of what it is.
Sir.
Thank you. Mark Rogers, 19 Trinity Court.
Welcome.
I'm going to take up a little bit of my time to congratulate all of you for the most transparent town meeting I think I've ever seen. And it's tough to make sausage in public, and I appreciate it. And Rosemary was 100% right. We passed an override because there was something in it for everyone. And if we don't do that, there will be no passed override.
But it was for things that the departments needed. It wasn't like a wish list.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
So my question is that 10 years or 11 years of 10% surplus free cash is more than a mistake, right? That's a strategy, right? Because we clearly have repeating revenues, probably close to $2 million that we are not putting into the general fund. My question is, why aren't we doing that?
It's a policy question for the select board and the manager.
So I can just go over our free cash numbers. 2012, 2.3 million. 2013, 2.4 million. 2014, 5.4 million. 2015, 5.9 million. I don't know what happened in 2016, but it was 11.1 million. 2017, 9.7. 2018, 11. 2019, 12. I believe what happened around 2017, 2018, 2019, I wasn't here, was that we had the Columbia gas situation and we were able to return more funds or because police and fire, et cetera, were actually paid for their details and overtime through them. What we've done every year is we've used a great portion of this free cash to offset our capital. However, we're not generating more free cash than we should be generating annually. Like I said, they recommend between 5 and 7%. This year we were at 5.5.
Any other commentary? Please.
Hi, Nadia Chinchilla Marto, 64 Whitebirch Lane.
Welcome.
Thank you. I just need some clarification. So if you can only tax up to 2.5%, and inflation is an amount higher than that, you're already starting at a deficit. Correct?
Yes. Yes.
Inflation in 2021 was 4.7. In 2022, it was 8.0. In 2023, it was 4.12. In 2024, it's 2.9. And yet in every budget booklet that I've seen from 2021, 22, 23, and 24, we seem to say the town is substantially taxing below the levy ceiling. So I'd like to understand the reasoning of why we were taxing under the limit when we knew that inflation was significantly higher.
Thank you. We'll get an answer to that question. And that's another policy question for the select board.
So if you look back at our excess levy capacity, my first budget here in town was fiscal year 21. Our levy capacity was $123,276. Likely that levy capacity existed because Chapter 70, we use state aid, we use the year before's number. So we're always going to have a little bit of capacity due to that protection. 2022, we only had $57,325 in levy capacity. To be honest, that year made me extremely nervous. In 2023 is when Amazon started coming on, and that's when we started putting forward this policy of understanding how we were going to use the Amazon levy capacity. That's why we had $703,000 in 23, in the 1.9 million in 2024. But in the regular years before we had Amazon come on, under the budgets that I did, we had very, very little excess levy capacity, actually less than 1%.
Anybody else? Joe?
And I mean, Ms. Chinchilla's first statement is correct. Like, we are always going to be behind, and that's by design from 1980. That's what the state passed. You can only go up by 2.5%. We have no law. We have to do that. And the policy as I was designed, certainly at a different time when we were planning on building and having the ability to borrow money and to use the space in that levy capacity to then cover those loans, right? Like that was the purpose of doing it, so that we could not have our taxpayers pay as much for those projects. And that's the thing that we're trying to revisit right now. Like that was the goal, and now we feel like we might need to do something different. And are we willing and able and comfortable to do that different thing?
Thank you. Let's continue to be efficient. Ma'am.
Rebecca Cesarski, 498 Osgood Street.
Welcome.
So Kittredge is made up of 25% of the population is on IEPs. IEPs are mandated by the state to be formed. We have seen a significant increase in expenses for out-of-district placements because we're not able to.
A question, please.
Yep, I'm getting there right there. The students' educational needs. Are we evaluating what the future spend is for the out-of-district placements due to the larger class sizes, less teacher assistance there for those students?
Thank you very much.
So yes, we are evaluating our out-of-district costs. We are evaluating, I guess I don't understand your question. Are you asking, are we evaluating what the cost could be if we had larger classes and less assistance?
Correct.
That's exactly correct.
Okay, so I guess I differ in that I believe that if we are somewhere between the blue and the purple budget, while our class sizes will be larger than what Kittredge School is used to, they won't necessarily be larger than what we as a general collective district have had. And in the purple budget, there's no reduction of teaching staff to our students, for special education. But we are evaluating, we do have a number of students who are in out-of-district. We are evaluating our students. We are evaluating all of our district programs. We are evaluating the needs of our students. As I've said before, we had the Urban Collaborative come in. We have a Special Education Advisory Council. Our Special Education Director, Lynn O'Neill, that's largely some of the work she has been doing this year, is looking at all of our programs in district. Are we meeting the needs of our students? Do we need to change what some of those programmings look like? So that, as also was pointed out tonight, I think by Jeannie, that we have a larger than typical special education percentage in this district. So we have a responsibility to look at what we're offering to our students, and can we offer something different, or can we change and use our services in a different way?
Thank you very much.
Can I make a comment, please?
Please be my guest.
It's actually probably a question.
Right into the microphone.
Yep. If the Kittredge is closed, is there any way that you would see that your actual resources might increase for those kids that are available? Because you're consolidating your resources, and instead of maybe having a 0.5 and a 0.5 FTE over here, you're going to have a 1.0, and the more services will be more accessible.
Yes, that's what I was trying to allude to when I was speaking before, that all of those support staff service are not going to be reduced or cut, that we are going to do just what you said, consolidate so you don't have a 0.5, 0.5, 0.4, 0.6, that you're able to bring them together and to be able to support our students.
And the more you accommodate those services, that can help your out-of-district costs. 'Cause
absolutely.
If you can handle them in-house, you don't need to send them out.
The other thing, and this is what I was talking about when I said we need to look at the efficiencies in our district, we need to evaluate all of our schools. We need to look at all of our schools and what the needs of all of the students in all of our schools are, and perhaps, and that this is potentially going to happen for FY26, reallocate the resources that we have in our district to meet the needs of our students. Schools are much like homes in lots of ways, and they become families, and we become very attached to schools, and we become very attached to our family within the schoolhouse. And so sometimes you may have 2 reading teachers or 3 reading teachers or certain support staff, and you continue to move along with that support staff within your building. But the needs of our students change within those schoolhouses. It's our responsibility to look at every single schoolhouse in this district, look at the needs of the students in those schoolhouses, and decide look at all of our reading teachers, how many reading teachers need to be at this school, how many reading teachers need to be at this school, and at the other school, the same for ELL services and special education services. And that's part of the work that we will be doing within this budget.
Thank you. If I might, I'd ask my colleagues at the table to refrain from asking questions at this point, so we can have the audience do that. I'm going to add an extra 3 or 4 minutes to our time together with the audience. Ma'am.
Thank you. Lauren Mercero, 200 Brentwood Circle. And Mark, I timed myself, so I'm asking for grace, please. So Ms. Lathrop, you said the purple budget will create the same curriculum and services. I would strongly disagree with that. The purple budget puts 225 Kittredge students at Sargent, where there's a total of 750 students together.
No, it doesn't. The purple budget puts the Kittredge students at Sargent, Franklin, and Atkinson School.
I thought that was the blue budget.
Nope, the blue budget puts all the
Okay,
students at the
I
Sargent.
swapped, I apologize. So state guidance is 1 counselor to 250 students. Ms. Lathrop, you have shared that Sargent has 2.3 counselors. So my question is, for the social and emotional well-being of the students, no one has been able to answer this. Why can Kittredge not be kept online for 1 more year to create a thoughtful plan to transition these students and make sure that they have the social and emotional support that they need?
Thank you for your question. And we'll, unhelpful, everybody, just stealing time. Queries, answers from the school committee or the superintendent? School committee?
So I just want to remind you, I don't know if you've been at all of the meetings, but we had a counselor from Sargent School, Jillian Conley, speak once and talk about that transition of Kittredge students to Sargent School. Every transition can be challenging, but there's also a lot of opportunity in a transition. And this would not be this is not an unthought out plan. There would be an opportunity for Kittredge students to visit their new school, for their new school principals to visit Kittredge School. There's opportunities for engagement, to meet some of the people at the schools. Yes, counseling is something that we have to look at as in our district. We don't have as many counselors that we may want to have, but it's also something that we have to look at. Do we have, just like I was saying before, look at the needs in the schoolhouses. Do we have more counselors at some building that we might be able to reallocate? We do also have Care Solace. Now, I'm not going to pretend that Care Solace can take the same place of a school counselor, but it's something that we invested in order to be able to help meet the mental health needs of our district, both our students and our families in North Andover.
If I may.
No, thank you very much.
My question wasn't answered.
Excuse me.
Kittredge to stay online.
Excuse me. Please come to the microphone.
So the question was if Kittredge stayed online for 1 more year.
Yes, please.
So the reason why I haven't proposed Kittredge staying online for 1 more year is also because it's a financial savings, and we have a financial issue that we have to correct and have to live within those means. And by able to take a small school and disperse the students into some of the larger schools, I think I said it when I was taking, if you look at the blue budget, there's 12 classrooms at Kittredge School. Those 12 classrooms could move into the Sargent School with an addition of 5 teachers. And that is a way of saving funds when we know that we were originally looking at 64 million and potentially needing 71 million.
Please.
Do those changes also make the
Excuse me,
equitable?
Janice, we're staying with the audience. You'll have time for follow-up later at the table. Go ahead.
Hi, Allie Roberts, 31 Bridges Lane. As someone who is already in an AP US History class with 29 people, and that being the projected class size for the next budget, or one of the budgets, how can you assure us that that class size that is already huge won't grow?
Thank you for the efficient question.
I believe in both. If you look at the slide that's here, this is the purple budget that showed. So AP classes, the class size would be between 28 and 29. I don't have the blue budget in front of me, but I will look. I do believe that it still is in the blue budget. AP courses are between 28 and 29.
Quick follow-up.
But that's already the class size. That's my question. Is it going to rise from what it already is?
You just heard the answer to that is no. Please. please.
Hello, I'm Brandy Baldock. I'm at 521 Salem Street.
Welcome.
Thank you. I wanted to share that at a previous meeting, I learned that the special education, from a special education teacher, they shared that under the current level service budget, that special education teachers in the schools face staggering caseloads. And in fact, in one of the elementary schools, there are 24...
A question,
Yeah, I'm coming to it. Thank
Go to
you,
the
sir.
question.
So 24 IEP students in one class, they technically have an aide, but they are covered all by the same aide. That's not what I think of when I think of getting an aide for a child in a classroom. And so my question is, as parents become aware of more of these situations with even larger class sizes containing more students on IEPs, well, how is that going to affect the special district budget in terms of out-of-district services as it grows under the blue or purple budget?
Thank you very much for the question. You're a popular person today, Pam.
I think I've answered that question a few times.
Nope.
Let's be courteous, everybody. Please, please.
So what I've answered is that we are not proposing cutting to special education, and that in the purple budget, which I have said that I'm advocating for, class sizes are 25 and below. Now, I'm not telling you that it's great right now and that our special education services are not taxed, as you have already said, but what I have said is that we're going to take a very close look at the needs of each of our schoolhouses and realign our staff members if we have to, because while that's one staff member that you spoke to, there may be another staff member, special education teacher in the district, who has less than that students on their caseload, and maybe considerably less than that number on their caseload, and we need to redistribute our teachers in order to meet the needs of our students. I will be the first person to tell you that we need to look at all of the needs of our students, special education, ESL, mental health, general education needs, and just like somebody said before, looking at new courses, STEM or robotics, in both middle school and potentially in the elementary school. But that will be in the work that we do in the strategic plan that we have to do as a district.
Next questioner, please.
Hi, Mark.
Welcome.
Juliet Dorman. I don't need to state my address, right? Nope.
Yes, your address, please.
Oh, sorry. 32 Clarendon Street, North Andover. My question is the following. Why are the educator collective bargaining agreements the reason given in Mrs. Rodriguez's last select board committee presentation and in the FAQ as to why we need so many cuts when the school committee negotiated with the union in good faith and Mrs. Rodriguez herself negotiated in what we thought was good faith, these contracts which were intended to address historic high inflation?
Thank you for the question. That's a question, I think, for the school committee. Mr. Brown, Dave?
I guess I don't understand the question.
The
Can
question,
you
if I might
repeat it?
rephrase it, is that this committee voted and negotiated with the Teachers Association in good faith. Why did it suggest and agree to something that might have a consequence of cuts down the line? Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, it's a perfect summary of the question.
Yeah, I can comment on that.
All right.
Would you want to go first? Can I?
What's that?
I would like to comment after you.
Oh, sure. So what I was going to say is that, you know, well, there's something in the FAQ that's actually unintentionally misleading or confusing. The member of the public asserted that the year two increase was 6%. It was actually 5%. So that was just incorrect. I think what is worth pointing out, we were aware that when we did the 4-year agreement, that in the out year, the 4th year, which is fiscal 27, was going to be a definite challenge, and that likely, I believe the words were, that fiscal 26 was going to be, the budget we're discussing right now was going to be a challenge, right? And however, one has to keep in mind, right, at that time, we did not know anything about a budget deficit. At that time, as far as we all knew in that room, everything was fine. So our thinking, I believe, I can speak accurately for this because I was part of the negotiating committee. Our thinking was, okay, we're going to have a challenge in the out years, but we have 3 years to get ready for that. Again, remember, we didn't have a deficit then. So just to set the record straight, we were aware that we were pushing the envelope, and we went back and forth, actually the town manager and the rest of us on the committee saying, hey, we got to get a deal done here. We got to give a little bit, but we have time, we thought, to make it up. Now that, as everybody knows, is not what unfolded afterwards. So just want to, that's the best way I can answer it.
Joe, quickly.
I guess I don't understand the characterization of bad faith. We negotiated a contract and we agreed to pay our teachers more money, which was accepted by both parties, knowing that it would be tough in years to come. But we also felt we were willing to do that because, like, to push towards that, because we know our educators were underpaid and they needed more money. And we wanted to signal that we were willing to work towards making their wages better. They're still not great, and we know that they're not great. And I think it's important that we don't characterize it as, I think the information that we need to recognize and be neutral about is, one of the challenges we're going to face next year is that the COLA for teacher salaries is 4%. And that is a big number. And it's going to be like almost $3 million. And we just have to, that's nothing, not good or bad associated to that. It's just what it is. And it's important, like, we negotiated the wages in good faith, but when you don't have enough money to pay all the teachers, you also then unfortunately have to make reductions. And we have a contract that understands and clearly identifies what those reductions and what the process is. And that's part of the contract and negotiations as well.
Thank you.
Can I?
No.
No, I was just going to thank Mr. Braun and Mr. Hicks. I didn't say bad faith. I said in good faith.
We're not playing defense here. Thank you very much. We got your question. You got an answer. Next question, please.
I had the same exact question. Debbie Rathali, 58 Palomino Drive.
Welcome.
Hi. I'm a North Andover resident, a taxpayer, a NAMS teaching assistant, and the co-chair of the teaching assistants unit of NATA. And my question was very similar in that a large percentage of the school budget are educator salaries, and the TA salaries do not even meet the Massachusetts living wage. And so how in the FAQs are we part of the cause of the budget shortfall? And I think that has been answered already. But if you can elaborate on that.
Do we have any other further comment for Deb?
I don't think in the FAQs we intend to state in any way, shape, or form that anyone's at fault for negotiating a contract. The point that I was trying to make in the FAQs, and I'm assuming you're talking about P35, is that I did raise an alarm in April, in March. I shared with both the teachers unit assistant unit, you were there, and the TAs, that the budget would only be able to increase by 3.5% in the future. I also shared that we had negotiated cost of living increases for town employees at 1.5%, 2%, and 2%. I created a chart, and I said that in that chart that they would require cuts in fiscal year 26. I received a letter from Juliet. I replied to that letter again saying that we were going to be facing very difficult decisions in fiscal year 26. I am glad that you're being paid what you're worth. However, I want us to remember that the decisions we make impact our budget moving forward. And so all I was trying to point out in P35 was that we were aware that this problem was coming.
I was speaking about the teaching assistants, not the teachers, and the teaching assistants are not being paid what they're worth. They are not even being paid a Massachusetts living wage.
Thank you. Please, sir.
My name is Parker Dubman. I live at 497 Wood Lane. Here's my question. How will the proposed budget cuts affect retention of all teachers and families who are considering leaving the North Andover school system?
It's a little bit hard to answer that question because I don't know if teachers and families are going to leave the North Andover school system. But I think that in any position that you have, any job that you have, oh, hi Parker, I remember speaking with you when I was here for my listening session. In any position that you have, as a working person, you have to make decisions about whether or not the environment that you're working is suited to you. And so if there are people that are working in North Andover Public Schools who don't feel as though this is the right environment for them, then they absolutely have that choice to decide to look for employment someplace else. I hope not. We have wonderful teachers and wonderful staff here. But I think that there are some cuts that will potentially happen. It's our intention to, once we decide on what budget will be and know what those cuts are, to work very closely with North Andover Teacher Associations and to inform staff if their position is one that is not going to be here next year, which gives them some opportunity to look for another position. As challenging as that is something that all of us at some point, I can remember it happening to me as well, have to do. In terms of families, I hope families will continue to want to come to North Andover. I hope families will see this collective union here, seeing people who generally care about their community, seeing, elected officials that have come together to try to find the right answer, who see incredibly caring and loving townspeople and students like yourself who love their community and want it to be the best place. And so while we are going through something that is really very hard and challenging and is going to there's going to be pains as we get through it, I hope that people see that it's also a community that will come together and support each other. I know that if something happened tonight to somebody or to something in this community, all of this aside would be put aside and this community would collectively come together to care for and take care of whatever was happening in the community. And I hope that that is something that people will see in light of all this other stuff and continue to want to live in North Andover.
Thank you very much. Next query, please.
Hi, my name is Serafina Cronin. I live at 1312 Salem Street.
Welcome.
Some of the budget cuts are suggesting a decrease in teachers on each team at the middle school from 5 to 4 to 2 to 4. This has the potential to make the classes larger, and being aware that multiple teachers have grades given for participation, how would larger classes affect participation and engagement in classes? And does this have the potential to make students uncomfortable participating?
Thank you very much. Class size?
What was your name?
Serafina Cronin.
Sarah, that's a lovely question, and that you definitely did your homework coming up here. So class sizes at the middle school would be potentially between 24 and 26, I believe, from here. And you're right, there are, the idea is that some teachers may potentially be on a two-person team, so they may teach more than one subject. I think that hearing from you as students about what might be some of the issues, just like you said, if participation is an issue, that's something that we make our staff aware of and that we plan for that. Those are the kinds of things that our teachers do all the time in professional development. Think about ways that they connect with their students and ways that they can have more engagement within their classroom. There's lots of opportunities for engagement. We have technology that allows, in some ways, for engagement. There's ways of just like tonight, not everybody's probably going to have a chance to answer their question, but they may be able to submit their question. There may be some things that we do certainly like that. But you as the students are going to help us to look at what may be some of the potential problems that we don't necessarily see and how we might be able to fix those problems.
Thank you very much. Please.
Hi, my name is Madden Kelly. I live at 28 Berkeley Road.
Welcome.
If the level budget cut is not passed, the current 4 and 5 teacher teams with teachers that teach individual subjects could potentially be cut to 2 or 4 teacher teams. How will the education of these students be ensured if there are less teachers that could be teaching subjects that they are not specialized in?
Thank you.
We would ensure that all teachers have the proper certification for the subjects that they're teaching, so that I think the students can feel confident knowing that the teacher in front of them has the certification, the degree to be able to deliver that piece of curriculum to them.
Thank you for your query.
My name is Juliette Benet. I live on 7 Olympic Lane.
Welcome.
Do you think increasing the numbers in AP and honors classes and cutting certain electives is in the best interest of students, especially when these courses provide academic challenge, college readiness, and opportunities to explore our interests?
Appreciate your very efficient question. Anybody else? Joe?
Ideally, we wouldn't have to reduce courses. Like, that would be the goal. And is it going to be different for students to be in a classroom with more kids in there? Yes. Does it make me sad that there would be less electives for kids? Yes. But we also have to make sure that the budget that we pass is able to sustain itself and to make, not just for next year, but for years to come. And I have to balance those things in my mind about how to achieve both of those ends at the same time. How do we make sure we minimize the cuts and the impact on kids, but also ensure that our system can function well within the greater town? And that is a hard balance to try and strike.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your question. Next, please.
My name is Devlin Hentz. I live at 864 Chickering Road.
Welcome.
I'm an 8th grader at NAMS. I understand that salaries are a huge part of the budget. Understanding that, though, what would you cut if freshman athletics and cutting teachers was not an option?
Thank you.
So freshman athletics has never been on the something that we've proposed to cut. In one of the budgets, we did propose a 10%, I think so far I think we're talking about blue and purple now. In the blue budget, it was a 10% reduction to athletics, and in the purple budget, there's no reduction to athletics. And what was the other part of your question?
Just if not cutting teachers and freshman athletics were off the table, what would you cut?
So she's saying,
if you couldn't cut teachers, what could you cut?
if we couldn't cut teachers, what else would we cut? So you might have to cut a service. You know, we looked at maybe in the town side, or we may have to look at, right, that there might, that's what we're looking at, like a service.
Right.
The library in town, there are certain things like that we may have to look at if we weren't cutting teachers. But I want to point out that in the high school, it does say less electives, and there are less teachers. You are in course elective time now, and that gives us an opportunity to see what students are interested in and what students want to do, and it really will help shape some of those decisions that we make moving forward. And North Andover High School has a very robust elective course, which is wonderful, and we want to continue to try to provide that as much as we can. But in a time, if we had to make budget cuts, it is an opportunity that we probably could cut some electives and still have a very robust elective course for our students.
I think what's also really hard when we, in our budget, Devlin, is 85% is salaries. So once you take that out, the left 15%, it's really hard to figure out what else, what of that can go. And when even if you take a bunch of that away, it won't add up to the $3-4 million that you need to cut. And that's sad and unfortunate, but that's why it's salaries where the biggest brunt is sometimes felt.
Could
I'm going to, please.
Add something. I think, too, it may be not heard, but one of the things we're trying to do is be more efficient, right? If there's an elective that, for example, that only has 3 students that want to take it, yes, it would be wonderful if we could still offer it, but that's the kind of thing we're looking for, right? To stop doing that so that we can continue to offer the other ones.
Very quickly, because I'd like to get everybody in before the time limit.
And the other thing, as part of our directives, we did, the school committee did say to the superintendent, don't cut whole programs like library and music and art programs, and reduce those, because we know that cutting them would be an easy solution. That would be a bigger, more negative impact on our kids just to cut wholesale programs like that. And that was something we asked the superintendent to try and avoid.
I'm going to cut off the line if you don't mind. I think we can get everybody in. We may not get there, Adam, I'm sorry. But notwithstanding, next, please.
My name is Elsie Geiselman. I live on 167 Quarterfield Road, and I'm a 7th grade student at NAMS. Your budget says that they are cutting 6 to 8 teachers of core subjects at NAMS, so classes would have to get bigger, and my classes are already 26 kids, so how will you keep classes at 24 to 26? I'm trying to understand how many teachers will be able to get to know me under these circumstances.
Thank you very much for your query.
I appreciate your question, and I'm really proud of you students for coming out tonight and advocating for yourself. That's what we need. We need more of that. We need you to stay engaged now when you're 13, 14 years old. Maybe I aged you a little bit higher than you are, and continue to stay engaged in your community, wherever you may happen to be. From my calculations and from the work that we've done and talking to your building leaders, we are able to make those reductions in teachers. And it's core teachers, and it's also looking at related arts, and be able to keep the class sizes between 24 and 26. That is our goal. I believe that we can do that. I wouldn't put that in print if I didn't think that that was something that we would be able to do. But it does mean some, just what we said, sort of looking at some efficiencies, looking at some of the things that we can offer, perhaps looking at some different kinds of related arts, how we might shift that a little bit. But our goal is to not have classes larger than between 24 and 26.
I'm going to ask us to be as quick as possible in terms of directing both our questions and our answers. Next, please.
Hello, my name is Shannon Gately. I live in 4 Phillips Court. I will make this quick. I do want to start off with a quote, though. That's okay. It's one of my favorite quotes I try to live by. That the world is led by your example, not your opinion. And it was said at a prior committee meeting by one of our committee members that schools right now are already underperforming, and that even passing a level service budget is still a disservice to our kids. So I would like to know if you could please explain to me where the logic is in making cuts to something that's already underperforming. How is that making it better? And why are we not hearing ways from all of you to try to bring in revenue for our students and for our towns?
Somebody from the committee wish to answer, the school committee?
Can I answer that real quick, just one part of it, your revenue question? Because I think the revenue question is really key. Last year, we had the opportunity to raise a tremendous amount of revenue for this town through the redevelopment of Royal Crest. And it was, I'm sorry, what? 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I'm sorry. Brain dead here. If we had passed that, we wouldn't even be in these circumstances at all. And I just want to remind people that when the town has the opportunity to bring in a fair amount of revenue from an individual project or a variety of projects, we have to look at them seriously and think of the impact going down the road, because things would be completely different now. Revenue is significant. Your question is right on. What about the revenue? And that's just one instance of where collectively as a town, we really did a disservice to our schools.
Laura?
Just to add to what Chris has said, in North Andover is in a unique position in the sense that we don't have a huge commercial base. We are 80% coming from our residents, right, in that Prop 2.5. So just something to, when those opportunities arise, we need to be cognizant of the impact in the future.
Fight for them. And fight for them. And the school committee needs to fight for those pieces of revenue.
Next question.
Hadley Dowd, 88 Sawmill Road.
Welcome.
I'm a junior at the high school, and I've had so many amazing opportunities from my time in North Andover. But because of the idea of expanding class sizes and reducing teachers, that will restrict the opportunities that kids of the future are given. And I want those same opportunities for the kids younger than me, and also for my senior year. So my question to you is, how do you plan to regain these opportunities with the plan to make cuts?
Somebody?
I think I can safely say that no one here at the table wants to make cuts. We all want to make additions. The barrier that we're facing, though, is that there's not enough money. And the only way to get more money is a nearly impossible task in the short time frame we have. And we've gotten to this point where we are faced with a really hard decision about where we're going to have to make some choices about what we have to let go of. And that's hard for a number of reasons. And we want to try and make those choices of what to get rid of and have the least amount of impact on as many kids as possible. And it's not going to be perfect for anybody, and it's going to be difficult. My own kids are going to experience the hardship too as they go into 8th grade next year. But that's what we are trying to figure out right now.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to say this. I'm just going to say the same thing to you that I said to the middle school. Your voice is really important. I've had some opportunity to speak to the student council. I came to North Andover High School. I had a listening session. I'll do it again where any student can come and speak to me. I know your counselors put that information out to you to hear what the things that are important to you. If we have to make cuts, we want to know what's important to you, where are the things that are your near and dear, and so that we can work as diligently, as hard as we can to be able to maintain the things that are important to the students. I have heard from students about AP classes. I have heard the contrary to some of what we heard tonight. Some students have said, I can live with 29 in my classroom. I know that's sort of just a matter of students and how we learn. But the more that you share with us, the more that we can tailor your education to you.
Let's move to a next question, please. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Nathan Wilmot. I live
Welcome.
at 144 Granville Lane. And I work for the town over the summer during the IT job, and I just have a few questions about it really quick. So over the summers, we basically have to repair classrooms and we do more than just repairs. We do student Chromebooks, and technology is really important to students. So I'm wondering, what are the plans for the future to keep these facilities running properly? Because it does take a lot of maintenance. Are you going to hire private companies, or what is your expectation for the future? Because these things break over time, and it's sort of my job, and it's a community I'm a part of that's helped me gain so many.
Question, please.
What are the plans for the future if you're going to remove the IT job? What are your plans to keep the technology aspects of classrooms running, because it's a major part of students' learning experience?
So the IT summer help position is cut only in the blue budget. It's not cut in the purple budget. And so some of that actually goes back to that we need to collectively come together as a community and talk about how we respect technology in our school district. Because honestly, our technicians are repairing far too many Chromebooks that are being used because they're not being used appropriately. That's another whole question that we can talk about at some point. But the reality is, if we don't have that IT summer help, it's going to take us a little bit longer, and our technicians, when they come on board, they'll be working in the beginning, either at the end. We'll either need to collect the Chromebooks towards the end of the school year, give them the opportunity to start working on them, or we'll have to not pass them out quite as early as we do in the beginning of the school year to be able to make some of those repairs. But again, the IT support is only cut in the blue budget, not the purple.
Thank you very much. We're going into overtime, as I promised you. Last two questions.
Yep. Dory Cossingham, 307 Ray Street.
Welcome. Speak
Thank
right
you.
into the microphone.
Ms. Medili raised a question earlier in the evening, and I wondered if you would answer it. She asked about selling the land in out country. You've told us that student enrollment is declining. You've talked about cutting elementary schools from 5 to 4. What are we holding that land for? Are there other assets that can be looked at as well if we're holding assets we don't need? That's my question.
We certainly can explore selling town-owned land. The problem with that is it's not really a long-term solution. So if we sell Foster Farm for $1 million, we have $1 million. It's not a recurring revenue. So it would come back on the tax rate. Maybe the bill is $15,000 a year, and that's all we really would get annually. So a lot of the time when we sell town buildings or we sell town property, what we actually do is we reserve that for future capital because it's not a recurring revenue source.
Municipal finance is sometimes odd.
Thanks for the overtime. Adam Bagney, 92 Colonial Ave. Thanks everybody for working through such a difficult thing. Appreciate it. Two quick questions, two things I want to understand that I think a lot of people would want to understand as well. In terms of the class sizes, it seems we're leading towards the blue and the purple budget. I'm curious what the data tells us about the class sizes in the blue and purple budget. How much worse do we, or not, do we expect our kids to perform in those budgets versus the level set, the yellow budget? And also we've talked about how, I've heard folks in our meetings talk about how the temporary closure of Kittredge could create more equity. I'd like to understand in more detail how students outside Kittredge would benefit from its closure. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Who wants to field? Ed?
I can talk about the first half of that because I looked up the research on the connection between class size and student performance. And it says that all else equal, small classes are better than larger classes, but first of all, the curve is not linear. It's more or less flat between 18 or 19 and 24 or 25. And the big gains come only when you get class sizes below 15. And the big cost in terms of performance starts somewhere around 24 or 25. The second thing about the research is that class size is one method, but only one method of improving performance, and it happens to be rather expensive. For example, when New York City made a huge effort to reduce class size, now, we're not exactly in this situation, but they ran out of teachers, and so they had to bring in more poorly prepared teachers, and in the end, they didn't get any gain. The cost of helping teachers to improve the way they teach is much smaller than the cost of reducing class sizes. In my 20 years of looking at working with schools that were trying to improve themselves, I routinely observed classes of 24 students in communities with poverty rates twice or three times ours that performed quite well indeed. So I don't think in this range, I don't think you gain very much. The cost on performance of raising class size, as long as you don't get higher than 25 or so, is relatively small, and the payoff for investing in helping teachers improve instruction is very high.
And we had a second part to that question, if perhaps Pam can express.
Sure. The second part, I think if I remember it correctly, was what would the other schools be gaining when we talk about equity. So other schools would be gaining reallocation of staffing. So as I said, we would look at all of our staffing, look at the schoolhouses, and be able to reallocate staffing. What they're also gaining is that they wouldn't be having larger class sizes. So if Kittredge School, if we didn't temporarily close Kittredge School, then the impact would be greater on the other schools because they're larger and you have the ability to put more students in those schools. Kittredge School, because of the nature of the size, you're always going to have small classes because you don't have the size to be able to expand to another class. So it's not a gain, but it's a gain in that they wouldn't be going to, other schools wouldn't be looking at 27, 28, where Kittredge potentially could be staying at 14 to 18 to 20.
Any other commentary?
And I just wanted to add on, and I think Pam has touched on this quite a bit, of being able to consolidate those resources to make sure all students have access to equitable resources that they're, at the current time, the way that it's put out, they don't have. So it's definitely a benefit to them in that sense.
I have one more.
I'm sorry, no. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. We cut off the line. I want to thank you for your patience with me.
Why?
Are we okay? 30 seconds. Go ahead.
What kind of training will we have, and when will be that training for the teachers to accommodate to those students?
The training is consistent to training that we're already doing in professional development. It's the training that we're doing when we talk about your connectivity to your students. It's the training that's already happening with how well do you know your students, how well are you communicating with your students. It's the training that we have in terms of unpacking our modules for wit and wisdom. It's the training that we have when we're talking about the mental health of our students and how we're caring for them. That our professional development isn't going to change. It's the work that's happening in the high school when we're talking about the portrait of the learner and preparing our students for jobs that we don't even know exist today. That is the professional development that is going to continue. These class sizes are well within what currently teachers are already being accustomed to working with. But we certainly will continue to work with the Professional Development Council that we have with North Andover Teachers Association. And if there are needs and more desires that the North Andover Teachers Association believes that they have, it's appropriate to bring that forward to that council so that we can meet those needs.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. First of all, I'm appreciative of the thoughtful questions that were expressed. I want to thank you for your patience with me as well as we tried to control this whole thing. And lastly, I have a query for you. Was this a helpful and appreciated experience, the question and answer? Well, I'm glad that it was. You need to say thank you to the boards themselves who designed this protocol. And I thank them for their participation and openness here. We're going to move back to the table right now for discussion, and let's see what other progress we make together.
So I guess the question becomes, Mark, right? Do we leave with the red budget now gone, right? We still have 3 budgets on the table. Do we wait until the school committee meets on February 25th and then reconvene our conversations? Or do we want to talk more now about people's wants and needs?
I'd love to at least do a poll, an informal poll of the other most controversial budget, which is the level services
Need to speak
budget.
into the microphone.
I'd like to do a poll of the other most controversial budget, which is the level services budget. I mean, either just the school committee and see how they're feeling about it. Again, this can be informal, or else the whole group here by a show of hands. Who supports the, what is it, 71 million budget, which is the level services budget, the highest budget?
I'm not opposed to doing it. I think that for this, it would be important to hear from everybody because a level services would require override and other actions that FinCom specifically would need to support, and Select Board would then need to put, they have a role in that in terms of putting that on the warrant. So I think it's important that we understand what our upper limits are as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like if everyone feels comfortable declaring how they feel, I mean, if you want to lead, again, it's informal.
We're going to put this up on the screen just to help inform the conversation. I want to say thank you to you for allowing me to cut you off from asking questions at the table. So if you had any questions for each other that you wanted to follow up right now, you're more than welcome. Excuse me?
Yeah. Chris just did in a way with that question.
Really fair.
Where are we at on the level services budget?
So rather than putting individual committees on the spot, perhaps we as a group, or you as a group more accurately, I don't have an opinion that I will express anyway, about this matter. So let's start with the easy one. Red budget, all those in favor of a red budget?
Oh, it's gone.
I know that. I know that. I'm trying to set
Give
a
us an early
standard
win.
here. So all those in favor of a red budget, raise their hands.
Oh, of keeping it or getting rid of it?
Getting rid of it.
Keeping a red
No.
budget. Everyone's hands are down. So I guess we revert then to blue is next. Those who believe that a blue budget is appropriate at this moment in time, based on the information that you have.
See, here's the thing. Here's the thing, Mark.
Go ahead.
It's that it's going to be easier for this group. That's why we did the red one first.
So then Chris, guide us as you wish. What's helpful to you?
All right. The reason I want to go to the level services budget because we're going from one extreme to the other.
Okay.
And it seems like because the middle two ones are the ones that we're struggling with more, and I even can't decide on that. But I have decided on the level services, which is our orange budget up there, this over 71 million. And so I'd ask everybody who is in favor of keeping level services on the table to raise their hand.
Could I ask a clarifying
Yes, you may.
question? So my clarifying question, Chris, is who is in favor of it in the abstract, or who is in favor of it given the odds on its success at an override?
Actually, it honestly doesn't matter one way or the other
Well,
to me.
It would matter a lot.
Because let's put it this way. This is either we keep it in or we eliminate it. And by the way, there's not binding here at all. And the school committee still has the opportunity to put forth whatever budget that you feel you have to put forward. This does not preclude you from doing that. But if all of you feel like, no, we can't handle the level services budget for whatever reason, then it doesn't get voted in. But we've gone back and forth about the ramifications of keeping it, what it means, and whether we're able to do it. I mean, you know, and like you said, what will happen if it gets voted down and something else isn't there? I mean, there are a lot of issues around it.
My confusion to your question is that if it were available to us, we would use it well. But I don't believe there's any possibility that it's going to get enacted, and I think there's a price for asking when you're not going to get it. And so I'm going to vote no, but I don't want people to think that's because I wouldn't want it. It's because I think that's actually not going to get us to the best solution.
And that's fair, and that's fair for you to make that choice. But I would just, again, an informal poll, and then if you say like, hey, I voted this way, but it's not. If I was sitting in your shoes and I was sitting on the school committee, which I have been there, I remember saying to everybody like, hey, this is my job to advocate for the kids, and that's what you're supposed to be doing. It is absolutely what you're supposed to be doing. However, now that I'm sitting on the finance committee and have been doing this for a little long time, and all three of my children are no longer in the schools, and they're old and they manage to survive and thrive and be very happy, productive adults, having gone through classroom sizes of 30 or more. You know, my point of view is perhaps a little bit more mellowed, but regardless, is everyone else willing to?
Can I?
Yes.
Yes.
No, and then.
And I know this will be not welcomely received. I right now lean towards blue or purple. I think I worry about asking, not just because of the improbability of success. I see that as it's a one-year solution, and it jeopardizes our ability to make good choices for our district in 2, 3, 4, and 5 years. I think it puts us in a really bad position to be able to rebuild a school, to even look at what other facilities we need to go for. And I think I'm also reminding myself that in theory, we really should, like, the 64.9 million was a 4.5% increase, and we were asking for a
15%.
A huge amount over that, and that, like, I want what's best for our kids, but it might not be the best thing for the long term to do that. And I know people are going to be unhappy with me making that statement, and that's fine. It's what I have to do is to vote the way I feel is going to be best for our long-term future too. So I'm actually uncomfortable going to the yellow and would advocate strongly for the 69 for the purple.
So, Chris.
Hold on 1 second. Thank you. So my concern with this discussion is ultimately it's up to the school committee on what they want to push forward. And I think that at this moment we're missing the opportunity of the school committee to sit and have this discussion as we were scheduled to on February 25th. And I don't feel that taking that out of our hands is necessarily fair, because it's ultimately our decision on what we want to push forward without, I mean, of course we respect the other boards, but it's us. It's our job, and I don't want that be taken away from us.
I agree, and this wouldn't take it away from you. And if depending on you stated your opinion, and Ed also and the opinions are valid. If the school committee doesn't feel comfortable with an up-down informal poll, that's okay. The rest of us can do it, and then you might have a sense of that might influence your discussion going forward.
No, I think it would be very helpful to us to have the poll.
You mean being aware?
Yes, being aware of where the other,
board
yes,
and the
where the
finance
select board
committee
and the finance
might
committee.
be
That's right.
recognizing that there's still
Yes.
many weeks to go
Again,
and lots of diligence
informal.
and consideration that's necessary.
That's right.
Dave.
So two things. So my two older children were here in the very bad times, 2005, 6, 7.
Yes.
And I was discussing this with them, and they were quite blunt about how it sucked. I mean, then those were their words. And they were little kids then, granted, but so that's where I'm struggling, right? I hear everything that everyone said. I tend to lean to where Joe just was, but, you know, it would be valuable to me to hear its likelihood of success, because if it's, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, if it's not, if I might want a level services budget, but if it's not going to get the endorsement of the other boards, then I would feel like it would be stupid to proceed that way. I said that at the beginning of the meeting. So it would be valuable to me to hear everyone's opinion. Understanding I learned a lot tonight. Thank you to everyone for educating me about all the ramifications, which was one of the things I wanted to hear. So I'm in favor of hearing that. That would help us on the 25th. Help me, for sure.
It's your meeting, and nobody can force anybody into expressing an opinion, but an opinion is welcome.
We want to have a show of hands then. If you support the level services budget, raise your hand. Okay. Well, then I guess, you know, you have some guidance here. And this is just really seriously for the benefit of the school committee, I think. Yeah. Just to show you where you're at. And
Do you want to ask the next question?
the next question? That's it.
Purple or blue?
No, we don't want to ask that question.
With respect in appreciating Alyssa's I think with respect.
Please.
And with respect to Alyssa's position on this is I think that there's still a good amount. It's not necessarily blue or purple. Maybe it's something in between.
Right.
And I think that's something we should leave to the school committee to
absolutely.
discuss and debate. So I think we've narrowed down the extremes, and I wouldn't want to take any more of that debate out of the school committee's hands right now. I think it's
I would agree. I think that we shouldn't go any further.
Yeah. Leave them up to their discussion, because there is more discussion for you to have. There's a lot to think about. So I think that's.
And what's the process of that discussion? It starts first with
It's their meeting.
a recommendation from the school committee.
Yes.
And then it gets transferred to town hall and to the FinCom.
Yes.
And the school committee has a responsibility for defense of that judgment to the FinCom.
Yeah, so look, the FinCom's scheduled to meet on March 3rd right now. Then we're working on meetings for the next 2 weeks, and then we have our public hearing and a scheduled meeting on March 25th. So we would expect to bring him and our town manager back to many of those scheduled meetings, and certainly members of the school committee would be more than welcome, the select board more than welcome to come and give their opinions and talk to us as well once this has been a little bit more clarified. But, you know, we intend to meet 4 times during March before we have a public hearing and make a vote.
And Ms. Cohn, Alyssa, sorry, can't do first names, last names. Our school committee meeting is going to be Tuesday, did we say?
I'm sorry, you said?
Our next school committee meeting is Tuesday the 25th.
Tuesday, the 25th.
Tuesday the 25th at 6 p.m.
We're working on
determining where the location is. And the expectation there is that we will finalize a number to then recommend and send to FinCom.
Yes, that's huge.
Our recommendation.
That's huge. Yeah.
I deeply appreciate, again, going back to my first statement at the beginning, the goal of transmitting the multiple budgets is to understand where we know that we are one part of the process, and the budget process is complicated, and ultimately for something to end up on the warrant, it goes through other people after us. And going to town meeting without a similar expectations is a disaster. That would not work out well for anybody, and I think it's important that we were able to collaborate in this manner to make some judgments about the strategy about where to go next, and that was helpful for us as a committee. So thank you.
Yeah, very helpful, thank you. Very helpful. Good.
Is there anything else to discuss at this moment in time? And I want to thank you for this privilege of seeing the sausage being made, if you will. But more importantly, it's important for us to recognize that there should be gratitude for your service, the hard judgment that needs to be made, the participation of our citizens, the influence that our citizens have on the judgments that are made, and it is ultimately the citizens' responsibility for what happens here. And I know that in good faith, we all desire the best interest of the community at large. I wish you a good night and good fortune.
Madam Chair.
Close, right?
Yes, I think we'll have to close out our
Yeah, you need to
individual
do-
meetings. Right, but just before we do, I would like to express my specific thanks to Pam, who had to deal with a lot of the questions tonight, because most of us aren't equipped to answer those, right? And I think your knowledge, your quick thinking on your feet, it shows how invested you are in the work that you've done in a very short period of time. And just from, the school committee gets to see it every day, working with you. I want to say on behalf of myself, and I'm sure I can speak for everyone else up here, that we're very appreciative that you're here, and we know how hard this is for you. So we do appreciate that.
Yeah, I just echo that sentiments. Thank you very much, Pam. I really appreciate all the work. School committee, you did, our town manager, everybody up here, really, really appreciative of it, and to you, Mark, as well, for the facilitating. But most importantly, to the people out in the audience, and especially the students who came with some great questions, and that was a special part for me that I'm going to cherish for a while. So thank you. And also, I would, if there's a motion from anyone on the FinCom, I would gladly accept it right now. And Eva moves for adjournment. Do I have a second? Second by Dustin. All those in favor? Aye. FinCom is adjourned.
Madam Chair, I move to adjourn the school committee.
And I second that. And I also want to thank Melissa for all her hard work for this. It was educating us over and over again. I very appreciated it. Thank you, everybody.
I just want to thank everybody coming together. I think this was very productive. We appreciate the collaboration. And this is what town democracy is about, and it's very much appreciated. So thank you.
I seconded it.
I will take a vote. So Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. Moskovich?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
And I vote yes. We are adjourned.
And the select board chair will also take a motion.
I'll move to adjourn the select board meeting.
I'll second that.
All right, I have a motion and a second, and we do appreciate Melissa as well. I'm sorry, I did not say thank you to you as well. All those in favor? Aye. All right, the select board is adjourned.